Excuse me, Your Worship, we should be live any moment.
Okay, just let me know when we're live, Chris, and we'll get started. Thank you.
I think we're live. Thank you.
All right. Okay, Council, it's 5 p.m. Time to get down to work. Today, we acknowledge that this event is taking place on the traditional territory of the Indigenous peoples of Turtle Island, including the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Ojibwe peoples, and on lands connected with the Lake Simcoe Nottawasaga Treaty of 1818. This is the home of a diverse range of Indigenous peoples whom we recognize as contemporary stewards of the land and vital contributors of our society. And with that, I will look to the Deputy Mayor, moving the agenda, seconded by Councillor McLeod, that the content of the special meeting of Council agenda for July 29, 2020 be adopted as amended. Bullet number 1, item added 5.2 OrgCode homeless shelter feasibility study proposal. Recommendation updated 10.1 added the receiving of advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. Recommendation added 9.1.2 Simcoe Street pilot project update, and item added 9.1.3 ban of barbecues and other cooking devices in Sunset Point Park. So with that being said, I will call a motion. All in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you. Do we have any declarations of pecuniary interest today? Go ahead, Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. I have a conflict in the in-camera portion of our meeting tonight. So that's item 10.1, as I am a board member of one of the parties to one of the properties. So I'll be recusing myself from one of the four.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments, Council? Seeing none, if you find yourself in that situation as we progress through the agenda, please let me know. Community announcements. I will start with you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. I have nothing this evening.
Thank you. Councillor McLeod.
I have nothing this evening.
Thank you. Councillor Comey.
Nothing this evening.
Councillor Doherty.
I have nothing this evening. Thank you.
Councillor Jeffrey.
Nothing this evening.
Councillor Berman. Take that as a no. And Councillor Hamlin.
Nothing, thank you.
I as well do not have any community announcements tonight, but I would like to pass the floor to CAO Skinner for an update on the Huron-Ontario sidewalk project.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. And I actually have Director Sloma, I believe, available to provide that update.
Good evening, everyone. CAO Skinner just asked me to provide an update on the removal of trees that our residents are seeing happening on Huron-Ontario Street. So this is, of course, is related to, it's somewhat connected to our infrastructure project that we're doing at the intersection of Huron-Ontario Street and Lockhart Street and Campbell Street. And that is some improvements to our intersection to allow for some turning lanes and some better traffic movements there at that very busy intersection. And then as part of that project, we were asked to include a sidewalk from Lockhart Road south to Tracy Lane. And so the trees that are being removed along the side of Huron-Ontario are related to the installation of that sidewalk, and also for some utility locates that need to happen for that project. And residents will see that we will be planting some replacement trees along Huron-Ontario Street, but not all of the trees can be replaced there. We had a direction from council to replace the trees at 2 to 1, and we will be losing 59 trees, I believe. So we have 118 trees to plant elsewhere throughout the town. And so some of those will be replanted along Huron-Ontario Street, some along Findlay Drive, some on Highway 26 East, the Legion Park, and some other areas around town. So yeah, that is what will be that is what's happening on here Ontario Street, and how we are committed to replacing those trees throughout the town and help maintain or improve our urban forest.
Thank you, Peggy, for that update. And we will now move on to item 5. Oh, sorry, go ahead, CEO Skinner.
Thank you, Your Worship. I actually had another community announcement, if it's okay.
Yes, please go ahead.
I just wanted to draw the public's attention to that there's been an update on the website of the judicial inquiry. And it has noted that the report council's been anticipating to come in summer. They've put a new revised date to indicate that council can expect that report prior to October 31st, but not necessarily this summer. In fact, I expect it to be past summer. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And we will look anxiously for that report when it comes out. Councillor Doherty, you'd like to speak.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Through you to Director Slama, I just wanted to confirm that the sidewalk that we are putting in along Lockhart up to Tracy Lane will be wider than our conventional sidewalk, and so will it help to accommodate both pedestrians and our young cyclists.
Director Slama.
Through the mayor to Councillor Doherty, yes, the sidewalk that we are installing will be wider than our typical sidewalk. Unfortunately, we were not able to fit in a 3-meter wide sidewalk, which is our standard for our multi-use trail, but it will be 2 meters wide. And so that will help just provide a little bit more space for our active members of the community.
Thank you,
That's terrific. That's terrific. Thank you.
All right, so we'll move on to item 5.1, or item 5, the consent agenda. And it is moved by Councillor McLeod and seconded by Councillor Homey that we receive the items on the consent agenda. Item 5.1 being the Rainbow Club of Georgian Bay LGBTQ2S+ representation and public art policy. And item 5.2, the OrgCode homeless shelter feasibility study proposal. So first we'll pass to receive the consent agenda, and then I will ask if there are items to be pulled. All in favor of receiving the consent agenda? That is passed unanimously. Thank you. Councillor, the items that you would like to pull. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you. I'd like to pull 5.2.
Okay. Is there anyone that would like to pull item 5.1? Councillor Doherty, we've got you on that one. So we'll start first with the Deputy Mayor and then go to Councillor Doherty. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Just for council and for the public, this is a request that's come in specifically from the with regards to the Out of the Cold program. And I just wanted to take a step back and acknowledge that over a year ago, we were requested we were petitioned by a local group that was getting together to sorry, just give me 1 second, please. Sorry, can you, do you mind coming back to me for a second?
Sure, we'll progress to Councillor
Yeah,
Doherty,
thank you.
back to you. Okay, so Councillor Doherty, item 5.1, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. This initiative is so consistent with generally our public arts goals, but in particular, our goal having to do with the acceptance and recognition of diversity and inclusiveness in our community. And I think this is an excellent recommendation and an excellent place for this particular installation to appear. And I see that we do have actually a resolution to proceed. And I'm just wondering if you will be reading that, Your Worship, or if you would like me to do that.
Certainly, Councillor Doyle, I'll read it in, and I think you're prepared to move it, and then we'll look for a seconder. Does that make sense? Okay.
Thank you.
So the resolution is, whereas the Rainbow Club of Southern Georgian Bay has requested that a pending public artwork be themed to represent the presence of the LGBTQ2S+ pending within a diverse community that supports all of its components. And whereas the Collingwood Public Art Policy acknowledges that projects may be brought forward from external sources, including nonprofit and community groups. And whereas a public art piece is planned for commission and installation at the Tremont Square in 2021-22 with a public art reserve building for this purpose. Now therefore be it resolved that council herein direct staff to proceed with the planned installation of a public art piece at the Tremont Square location with an interest in representing diversity and inclusion as acknowledged in our community-based strategic plan, which includes our LGBTQ2S+. And therefore that the LGBTQ2S+ be considered when striking the ad hoc selection committee and developing the terms of reference for a call to artists to submit and complete the work in accordance with the public art policy. And that is moved by Councillor Doherty, and we're looking for a seconder. Seconded by Councillor Jeffrey. Thank you very much. Any questions or comments, council, before I call the vote? Seeing none then, all in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you. Deputy Mayor, are you good to go?
I am, thank you. I'm going to address this and then I may step away again for a moment. So this is a request that's come in from the Out of the Cold task force, as well as other partners. And as I started to say before and I apologize for stepping away for a moment, just to gather my thoughts. We as a council received and were petitioned by a local group of people who were passionate about taking on the issue of homelessness within our community, as well as within the region as a whole. And as we're all aware, for the past winter of 19 and 20, we have run a very successful, or I shouldn't say we, this task force and the members of the Out of the Cold program have run a very successful shelter on behalf of our most vulnerable residents. And statistically, the numbers bear out, which is unfortunate, but that there is a need and that this need likely will continue. And it also, I think, bears out, and it's worth mentioning that although the shelter is located here in Collingwood and it's been funded primarily in part through our significant donation of $75,000 per annum for a 3-year period, but also through the generosity of the community as a whole, whether it be cash or in kind or other types of donations. The reality is, though, that the program was carried on beyond the original mandate as a result of COVID. Funding for the additional services and to move the program from its location over on Peel to a local resort facility was funded through the county via the province. And the reality is that that likely is to come to an end sooner than later, unless otherwise directed. But certainly it would appear from all indication and from those I've been chatting with that it's going to come to an end. The unfortunate part to that is that the circumstances and in which one would operate a shelter moving forward are very different today than they would be, say, pre-COVID. And we can't go back, like many other businesses, social organizations, our own selves as Town Hall, go back to simply the way things were pre-COVID. And therefore, as part of a feasibility study and as part of this request, the Out of the Cold organization is looking to support from us to be able to do a feasibility study that would in part, justify and warrant that there are needs, and I think we know that, but further really getting a broader understanding of where those needs are coming from, so that they would have a better understanding of what it is that they would be looking at going forward, and perhaps taking a look at how they best may be able to modify or amend or to better run or operate a shelter in these new realities or conditions. So I do have a prepared motion. I perhaps should have tabled it first and then spoken to it, but anyways, I've already spoken to it. So if you'd like, I can read it in and then we can move from there.
Yes, please go ahead. We'll read it
Okay.
and then we'll look for a seconder.
Okay. So it's moved by me and I'll look for a seconder, but whereas the Out of the Cold Shelter Services benefits Collingwood and the surrounding municipalities, and whereas the town of Collingwood is currently the only municipality providing operational funding for the program with an annual $75,000 commitment for 3 years, and whereas the proposed feasibility study is divided into 2 phases, with the second phase dependent on the outcome of the first phase, or of phase 1, now therefore be it resolved, the council herein support funding 50% of phase 1 of the feasibility study to examine permanent homeless shelter services in South Georgian Bay area for phase 1. And further, that a copy of this resolution be forwarded to our neighboring municipalities, the Blue Mountains, Wasaga Beach, and Clearview, to request and encourage them to participate in this meaningful exercise.
And I saw Councillor Berman, and he's confirmed his seconding of the motion. Councillor, any questions or comments before I call the vote? Councillor McLeod and then Councillor Hamlin.
How many dollars is this that we're being asked to approve out of the budget, outside of budget talks?
Deputy Mayor?
$18,000. I'm looking for the exact number.
Yes, and I think we've agreed to funding half of that, so we'd be looking at about $9,100, I think was the amount.
Correct.
Thank you. On a procedural note, I mean, should this be a notice of motion rather than a motion?
It was discussed with the clerk, but I will let Clerk Almas weigh in on that. We felt because it was on the agenda and flowed from the agenda that it was permissible. Go ahead, Sarah.
Certainly, since it was an item on the consent agenda requesting this, and we felt it was appropriate to put it forward.
This was a follow-up to that. It was an amended piece of the consent agenda. Did it not arrive today?
I think maybe late last night. I'm not sure. Clerk, can you confirm that?
I believe it was an addendum that was circulated yesterday.
Thank you.
Councillor Hamlin?
Yes, thank you. Just a few clarifications. So what you're asking us to approve is half of the phase 1 amount? Is that right, Deputy?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, thank you. And also through you, Mr. Mayor, to our Deputy Mayor, is there a deadline we need to hear back from our neighboring municipalities by? And will we be telling them that deadline?
So that is a question that I actually asked, and I think that it would be prudent to maybe entertain that, and or to, one of the things that we need to determine is sort of what their schedule is for the next period of time. There's some urgency in the request, so the sooner the later would be, or the sooner the better would be the answer. But I might defer to the clerk. We did have a conversation earlier today about this.
Sarah?
Certainly, through your worship, to members of council. I was speaking with Pam Hillier regarding this request that had come through. They indicated that they're prepared to go forward, but obviously they can't go forward without any funding. There is no other funding right now available. And if we approve this motion, we're approving it through the budget for 2020. So it would have to be undertaken this year unless council agrees to include that amount in the 2021 budget.
Thank you.
So just, sorry, just one perhaps follow up on that. When is it anticipated this study would be completed? And in particular, is it going to be used for this winter's needs? I know the needs have been ongoing through COVID, but I guess the needs maybe are more in the winter, or have things changed?
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you.
So specific to the timeline, I think that the company that they are looking at hiring is a company that is well-versed in this type of work. They, in fact, actually did the work for the County of Simcoe in preparing their 10-year affordable housing strategy. And the intent would be to have something done relatively quickly this fall, so that the work that's completed could be presented to the parties too for consideration moving forward, because it really is time sensitive, so that we can be prepared moving forward not only this winter but the next in offering the best service possible.
I've got Councillor Berman and then Councillor Doherty. Go ahead, Councillor Berman.
Well, thank you, Mayor Saunderson. I'm just wondering, because the Deputy Mayor referenced the effects on the program because of COVID, and I'm looking at Pamela's email, which also does, if it needs to go to budget, or can it not just come out of the COVID relief?
I will pass that through to CAO Skinner.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Councillor Berman. That would be the most available source of funding, most available to council. If we were to look at another option, we're already quite pressed within our budget this year. Thank you.
Councillor?
Further than that, do I need to do anything to make that happen, or is that in the hands of staff to look after it?
CAO?
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Councillor Berman again. I think that direction would be appropriate to come from council with respect to the source of the funds, unless Clerk Almas is about to tell me otherwise, but I think that direction would be needed. Thank you.
Okay. So then I would move that if this is the appropriate time to do so.
Yes, that would be the appropriate time. And I'll look to the clerk. Would this be a friendly amendment to the existing motion, or would this be separate?
I think it's an amendment to the motion, so we should have it a separate amendment.
Okay, so the amendment then that you're putting on the floor, Councillor Berman, is to direct staff that the funds come from the allotted 2020 budget for the out-of-call program.
That the 9,100 or whatever the amount was, rather than be pushed to budget, comes out of the 2.5 million that we put aside in the COVID relief fund.
Sorry, out of the 2.5 contingency. Yeah. Okay. All right. And I get a seconder, Councillor McLeod. And there are no comments or questions then on the amendment. Councillor Hamlin, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. My recollection of this COVID relief fund is that, we would use it specifically for that purpose. And to me, an analysis of our homeless shelter situation with our neighbors in terms of where do we need it, where should it be situated, how should people be trained, and so on, is not a COVID relief project. This is a need for our community that's long existed. The COVID funds, I know we've allocated up to 2.5 million, but that is our asset sale proceeds that I know we all want to put into legacy projects to replace the assets that have been sold. So I will not be supporting this amendment.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Comey and then Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Hamlin touched on something I think is important, and I'll continue that thread because I was actually just in correspondence with CAO Skinner this week about a community need that I thought was COVID related. It was related to back to school and the need for water bottles for some kids. And CAO Skinner was kind enough to remind me that council resolved that community needs would come through recommendations from the community roundtable. So we were no longer directing the social services needs through the fund, but rather we resolved that we would allow the community roundtable to address this thing for social services. And that's how I interpreted what CAO Skinner said to me, but perhaps you could kindly clarify.
CAO?
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Councillor Comey. That is a very good point, actually. I believe it was June 15th when Council looked at the staff report back on the Economic Recovery Task Force's recommendations. One of those was about the support for social services, and there was a resolution included in that the social services roundtable would be an appropriate group to provide council with information on community needs and gaps, and not from a quantitative perspective necessarily, but even from a qualitative perspective of, does the group feel that this is a gap in the community and is something that needs to be addressed, since it is a broad group that can comment to council overall on what's already available and what's already funded. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Unless there's any other comments or questions. Oh, sorry, Councillor Doherty, go ahead.
Thank you. Just a couple of thoughts. First of all, I don't have a concern to fund this out of our COVID relief fund, in that this study is more than likely being bumped forward expressly because of the COVID situation and the fact that we can't operate our out of the cold program the way we had done in the past, and thus we may not actually have had to do this year. So I have no concern. I'd be happy to support that amendment. I'm also very pleased to see that the recommendation is to only support half and to go to ask our surrounding municipalities to consider making a contribution, in that this is certainly to the benefit of this entire South Georgian Bay community. So that makes a great deal of sense to me. And finally, I'm just wondering if this is an item that in fact should be going out for public request for proposal, or if we're just going to award it to just one particular supplier, with a rationale that I'm not saying that they're not qualified, but I don't see a rationale why it should necessarily go to them without looking at other options.
I will look to CEO Skinner for that, some input there, but this is not a town venture. We're helping to assist in a venture by an organization. So I'm not sure that we capture the town's procurement processes, but I'll look to the CAO to speak to that.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I echo your opinion about it not being a town process. However, I would like to ask Clerk Almas, as procurement falls into her area, where there is a significant investment of town funds. Is it typical that we would ask that our typical municipal act compliant procurement processes be followed?
Certainly, through Your Worship, to members of council and CEO Skinner, not in a case of this, particularly for this amount. We require internally a more competitive process after it hits 25,000, but this is a request from them, and it's a study that they're retaining. So if we did have concerns, we could speak to them, but it would not normally be something that we would undertake.
Okay, thank you.
All right, if there's no further questions, then I will, Councillor Comey, I'm going to see if anyone who has not spoken yet would like to speak, and if no one wants to speak, then I'll come back to you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak on this issue? Councillor Comey, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor. Maybe someone can educate me a bit on this issue then. So if council resolved that spending for social services would only be through the recommendations of the community roundtable, and we're about to vote to spend funds out of the COVID relief fund for social issues, where does that leave us? I guess I'm just confused by that.
Okay, I'm not sure we designated only through, but I'll look to the CAO to speak to that, please.
Sorry, my mute button disappeared there for a second. I just was looking to reference that that motion. I think my recollection of it is that it's something along the lines of that council would seek input on the priority of social investments based on the advice of the social services roundtable. So I don't know if it precludes you from making a decision without it. I have an opinion based from a staff position on this one, which is that I expect, should the social services roundtable be asked if homelessness and emergency shelter was a gap within our community, that they in every likelihood would say that it is. However, I do know that many councillors have a good understanding of our community and probably have your own understanding of this issue. I don't know, Clerk Almas, if you have the exact text of the resolution from the 15th. That may be more insightful than my memory. Thank you.
Sarah?
I am just taking a look. Sorry, I think the text as it appears relates to approving the recommendations contained within the report, and I don't have the report called up at this moment.
If it's okay with you, I think I found it, because this ties into some things Director Rydlo will present today. With your permission, Mr. Mayor. What council? Thank you so much. So we have here in the report. So we received the staff report with a number of recommendations, and when it came to this particular, it was staff recommendation action item 6. I think this is what we're all referring to. In the interim, to ask the social services roundtable to collectively vet and prioritize requests to the town for emergency funding or other supports, and that any financial contribution be considered in the spirit of a matching grant program with private contribution. And again, the only reason this came up is because there was something I very much thought fit this funding model as well this week for COVID thing. And it was good enough for CEO Skinner to say, well, hold the phone, Councillor Comey. We kind of have a new procedure for dealing with these requests. So that's why I thought it was worthwhile for us to have this discussion then for all of council to get our heads around how we're using these funds.
Thank you, Councillor Comey, for that. All right, then. So I will move forward, because ultimately I think any decision on funding is will of council. And I don't think that this contravenes the spirit of what we've just reviewed. We certainly are working in conjunction with the Social Services Committee, but I don't think that ties council's hands to venture into an area that they deem appropriate. And I think that's what that vote is. This vote will be about. So with that being said, I will call the vote. All in favor of the contribution?
Are we voting on the amendment or the contribution entirely?
Sorry, I'm voting on the amendment to pull it out of the contingency fund of 2.5 million. All in favor? Opposed? So noted. Now we will vote on the main motion, which is for the contribution, which will come out of the contingency fund. All in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you. I've got to find my agenda. This brings us to staff reports and item 6.1, diversity, inclusion, and equity in Collingwood. And is it the Executive Director, Culver, that's going to be presenting? Welcome, Dean. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Council. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to work from notes a little bit. I'm going to try not just to read, okay? I know that over the past few weeks, I've made some comments about the weight of this report, but I wanted to say thank you to you all for providing this as an assignment, because it's been an eye-opener, and it's actually been pretty rewarding to arrive at this place. So I will proceed with my notes first, and then I'll get into a little bit of description. And all I'm really doing is sort of walking through the report so that hopefully create some clarity and then inspire any questions that you might have. So 6 weeks ago, you asked us to bring back a report describing how the town might apply more focus on inclusivity and diversity, and as well any options available to our municipality to prohibit the display of symbols of hate or intolerance in both public and private spaces. As indicated in the report, the town has taken some steps in the direction of enhanced inclusivity in the past. However, I believe we all agree progress can't happen quickly enough, and the energy that council has placed behind this report is a welcome opportunity to significantly advance this progress and become the community that we know we can be. In addition to this report, I'd like to mention some other background gathering that staff undertook to build a rudimentary understanding of our current condition in Collingwood. We reached out to 11 individuals representing a racialized cross-section of Collingwood to gain some unvarnished lived experiences that would give us a sense of the challenges we're facing. Though these conversations have been documented, I didn't publish the notes that were taken. A majority of those individuals didn't want to be identified. Some of the people we contacted have volunteered to be a part of the Gathering Circle advisory group that's forming, which I'll get to a little bit later in the report, but many didn't want to be named. In my opinion, we need to get through tonight and take a few more steps down this road before some members of our community know that this is a safe place for these voices, and hopefully more are protected from harm. Under others consulted, you'll notice many resources that we tap in to build the basis for what's expressed in this report. And one key resource that I'd like to mention is Senator Boniface. Senator Boniface took some time to meet with the mayor, the CAO, and myself, as she's engaged in an initiative in Aurelia to help bring together the racialized community there. And it was eye-opening and exciting to hear her experiences and validate the emerging information that was being developed through researching this report. At the beginning of the analysis section, sorry, I'm getting an echo and I'm sorry if I stumble. At the beginning of the analysis section, you'll find a reference to the role individual bias plays in developing systems of bias. Once a collective bias has been established into a system of bias, these systems are very difficult to change. They're often protected by a hierarchy of privilege, and they are reinforced by those who hold privilege, out of sometimes unconscious fear that that privilege will be lost. Once we arrive at this place where privilege protects bias, in other words, where privilege is protecting the racism inherent within a system, it's up to community leadership to recognize the problem and guide the members of the community forward. And I'm sure you know this, but in fact, that's what you all committed to in June. And for whatever it's worth, I applaud you for it. Without leadership to break the cycle of frustration over systemic bias being offset by being offset by bias that's protected by privilege, a community will be locked in an unending struggle and it won't move forward. So with that in mind, and with council support, staff took a look at what we could recommend to assist with the change that's being sought. And the first step that we came up with, and this was actually mentioned back in June as well, is listening. Now, listening sounds easy and it sounds like a passive activity and it sounds almost like an academic activity, but it's actually can't be. It can't be passive and it can't be academic. It has to be with intention and consciousness about how these conversations occur. You have to work really hard actually at removing privilege from the conversation, pre-analysis, even best practices in other communities, because you don't know what informed those types of conversations or what those types of outcomes. We need a Collingwood solution. And so we have to have a Collingwood conversation with the members of the community who are feeling the effects of racism. So listening is actually a little more than just listening. We've recommended the formation of a gathering circle. The gathering circle concept comes from a traditional Indigenous village. This is actually something I consulted with Duke Redbird on to make sure that I understood the concept completely. And Duke informed me that that in a gathering circle in a traditional village, everybody meets in the middle at the same level, on the same merit, with equity. They gather by the fire, which is the source of warmth in the village, and they impart information upon one another, and they make decisions collectively. This seemed like a really good model and a really good concept for us to follow. And symbolically, we presented it to a few people who indicated that they would have an interest in being members of this group, and it was embraced. So I'm really grateful that to Duke and also to the members who picked up the idea and are excited by it. We also did a project we called the Doorway Project, and it gathered a lot of insight. Actually, it was pretty interesting to get the comments that came from what was written on the doors. Some of it was very well informed, very constructive. Some of it was not as well informed, and I think that says something in and of itself. And some of it was not constructive, which I think was in the minority. There definitely wasn't a lot of that, but it does, again, give us some insight. The Doorway Project collection, the words that we collected from the Doorway Project will be a basis of a website that we'll be looking to build, where a lot of this inclusion and diversity information can be gathered and reside for public consumption. So the staff, we've also recommended that we apply to become a member of the Coalition of Inclusive Municipalities. This is an organization or a network, I think is a better description, formulated by UNESCO. There are 82 Canadian towns and cities within the network, and they all want to improve their policies against racism, discrimination, exclusion, and intolerance. And while I said earlier that we don't want to take an academic approach to listening, we definitely want to take advice from people who've gone through a process that's similar to this one, and we want to make sure it meshes and works with what we gather locally. But there is a value in a network, and there is value in actually, there's a world-changing value in gathering together with like-minded municipalities. So we recommend joining the Coalition of Inclusive Municipalities. We've also reached out to the Canadian Centre for Diversity and Inclusion. So this is a not-for-profit group, social enterprise that provides advice and best practices, mostly related to employment and mostly related to HR practices. This became really important at some point in the research because we felt, we can't have a conversation with the community when we haven't actually looked inward into the town organization and ensured that we're taking steps to be more inclusive ourselves. We certainly follow, all of the employment standards and equity standards that exist, with hiring. I have no doubts or concerns about that, but we know there's more that we can do. And this conversation with the CCDI, a membership of the CCDI, will actually help us to have access to some tools that we can use to ensure that. We're currently evaluating that opportunity, and we've been in discussions with them over different membership opportunities and cost structures for consultation services they could provide. Anything we do, membership, I think we can take on within our operating budgets, but if there are any consultation services that need to be secured or required, we'd have a conversation with council about those and those costs. And then actually within the signed by law, which was actually one of the initiating points, obviously, I think everybody's aware with respect to this matter, we did become aware of an existing gap in the signed by law. That is that it doesn't actually address anything to do with profanity, obscenity, unlawful activity, discrimination. So we've recommended an amendment to the bylaw that could be added, which refers to the Ontario Human Rights Code and the Canadian Human Rights Act, because those two vehicles provide a very clear definition of what discrimination is, especially when it comes to something like a sign. We've also recommended that we develop a community inclusion and diversity strategy. So this is actually a part of the strat plan. There was a goal or an objective within the strat plan. The key elements would be that we need to establish some goals. These are measurable and achievable outcomes. We need to develop policies and procedures that essentially guide how we do things. We need to make sure that we have the support of leadership and develop a system of accountability so that as we go down this path, we're being true to the intent as guided by leadership. And it would have to contain resources, programs, and professional development. This is education. This is how we're going to learn. And then our final recommendation is about exploring the possibility of establishing a municipal charter of human rights. So this is a very unique idea. There's only one municipality in Canada that I'm aware of that I was able to find, the city of Montreal, that has a charter of rights and responsibilities. It is a concept within social law and something that I think would be really interesting for Collingwood as a leader in innovation to explore. I'm not asking through this recommendation that Collingwood commit itself to this approach, because quite honestly, there's a lot that has to be learned and discussed and discovered. And we would want to have legal opinions throughout to ensure that we weren't doing something that was deemed to fail. So it's something that I'm recommending that we explore it, but I would be back to council once we've done some exploration and determine whether the path forward is feasible or not. When it comes to the second part of the motion presented by council, and that was to look at options available to the town to prohibit the public display of symbols and hate and racial intolerance, we run into some serious barriers. And the biggest and most serious barriers, which is actually acknowledged within the motion itself, understanding that we have limited jurisdiction and that the federal government has oversight of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. The Charter of Rights and Freedoms is the major barrier to us enacting something that would prohibit hate speech. It's simply not our jurisdiction. However, obviously, we want to do what we can to encourage proper definitions. So there is a recommendations that we engage FCM and join with other municipalities across Canada to hopefully place some pressure on the federal government to develop a definition for what hate speech is. This would actually pave the way for there to possibly be some action taken by a municipality, but it is currently extremely challenging because we have freedom of expression in Canada, and freedom of expression includes expressions that we feel are offensive and potentially have a basis in hate. There was a comment and discussion in the previous council meeting about the living tree doctrine and the idea that the law has to change to meet the times. And this is absolutely authentic and true. It's actually a very, very interesting history going back to the 1800s and the coining of this phrase. And it talks about the fact that, yeah, something that's written into law in 1867 doesn't necessarily have application today. But again, the living tree operates at the Supreme Court level when you're talking about the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Changing the Constitution and changing the Charter of Rights and Freedom happens either by motion or by a resolution of the Supreme Court, or by 2/3 of the provinces representing 50% of the population. So really, again, this sort of demonstrates it's a little beyond, not a little, quite beyond the jurisdiction of a municipality. I also put in the report a reference to the Oakes test. And the Oakes test is the tool by which all challenges to the charter are filtered. And this is where we talk about proportionality. And there is some subjectivity here. There's actually subjectivity throughout all of this. But I will say that there's some subjectivity when it comes to understanding what is proportional. So proportionality refers to the idea that an action we take to impinge upon the freedoms, expressed freedoms under the charter of someone, must have a proportional outcome that benefits the greater good of the public or society. And what's unfortunate or maybe unfair is that most of the cases where proportionality has been tested, proportionality refers to the fact that if we were to be successful in impinging upon the freedom of somebody as identified under the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, it's not just that person or that local case that would have to be considered. It is got a broad bandwidth that would have to be measured within that proportionality. So in other words, an action taken that affects the charter has a broad effect, and that's how they determine proportionality against a single occurrence. Further in the report, I talk about the legal considerations regarding municipal authority. This is a concept known as ultra vires. And I grabbed this pretty much explicitly from the municipal guidebook for councillors. And this really talks about what is within the jurisdiction of a municipality and what is not. The municipality exists as a function of the province under the Municipal Act. So it's enabled by the province. And so whatever happens, whatever the province whatever the province's powers are, it's only what is allowed, what is transferred to the municipalities is what we have the power to do within a municipality. So there is some very clear concepts around what is ultra vires and what are the powers of a municipality to take authority and action when making law. So we arrive at the conclusion, and I can't say this clearly enough because, again, as hard as this was, it was as eye-opening as it was equally eye-opening to build this report. And I have no doubt that we have challenges in Collingwood. I have no doubt that racism exists in Collingwood. I have no doubt that hate speech exists in Collingwood. And I think we have to do some work. And I believe council is on the same page with that. However, what we can do has to be guided by what's within our power to do. And I think a lot is within our power to do. There is a lot that we can do to change the world and to change our community. And I hope council through this report will give us the chance to do that.
Thank you, Dean. That was an extensive and complicated report, comprehensive as well. I think what I'm going to do, council, is to sever it off into its requisite parts and deal with those parts individually so that we can have full discussion on each of the recommendations and the questions can be focused by the recommendations. So this is moved by Councillor Comey and seconded by Councillor Doherty. Whereas council, in recognition of the strength of community that is derived from embracing and appreciating all community members regardless of ethnic origin, gender and sexual orientation, socioeconomic status or faith, and in accordance with the objectives of the community-based strategic plan, and provided staff direction to develop a community inclusion and diversity strategy that will encourage, promote, and insist upon awareness, equality, and acceptance by all residents of the town of Collingwood. Therefore, be it resolved that council receives staff report CS 2020-5, diversity, inclusion, and equity in Collingwood. That will be the first motion that we'll deal with. Council, are there any questions or comments on this item before I call the vote? Councillor Comey, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I feel this would be an appropriate time to first call out some points of Director Culver's staff report that I think our public would like to hear. And first, before we begin talking about the specific motion, I really want to thank Executive Director Culver. What an enormous undertaking and what a thorough report you presented. And there's a couple phrases here in the staff report that our public, you know, to be fair, might not take the time to read through the whole thing. But these phrases, I feel, in particular, should be spoken. And you speak to the Confederate flag in your report, and you say, known as the rebel flag, Dixie flag, and Confederate flag, and other variant terms, among other meanings, the symbol has been and still is often used by white supremacists and racist causes. Wow, good for you. Over time, the connection of these symbolic uses has been documented in connection to racially motivated murders, hate speech, and terrorism. Beyond the flag, the killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis, Minnesota, has people all over the world looking at all symbols, names, statues, and flags that celebrate a history of Black slavery and actions that are deeply painful to many. Again, wow, and thank you. There's another paragraph that I feel our public deserves to hear should they not have found the time to read this entire report. Part of your conclusion states, the public display of symbols that are even incidentally reflective of hate speech and racial intolerance have no place in a compassionate community. In truth, great harms are caused by the presence of these displays and the systemic and ongoing protection of symbols that persist despite a clear understanding of the harms they cause to racialized communities. Thank you, Executive Director Culver. What a historical staff report that you have in front of council tonight. And we'll continue with our discussion of the motion itself.
Council, I will call the vote on. All in favor of receiving the report? That is carried unanimously. The second aspect of the report is that it's moved by Councillor Comey and seconded by Councillor Doherty that staff, and further that council, in recognition of the power that symbols can have on the psychology and well-being of community members, work with the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, AMO, to petition the provincial government to enact legislation that would enable municipalities to make enforceable decisions regarding symbols deemed unacceptable by the local community, such as consideration to also include a review of statutes where hate speech may be identified as illegal. So this portion is dealing with an advocacy piece with AMO. Are there any questions or comments, staff, council, before I call the vote? Councillor Hamlin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to say, really, with respect to this resolution and the following one, that I was so happy to see the words used that allowed us to be a community who advances the needle to do more than just make a strong statement. And these two clauses, and I'll speak particularly, I guess, to the AMO clause, to work with our federal and provincial lobby groups to actually get something done. And I love the wording, work with AMO to petition the provincial government, and then so I won't have to speak again. The second one, direct staff to engage FCM to petition and advocate with the federal government to strengthen laws and make sure we're on the right track. So again, thank you for this report and those words. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Culver, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, if I could just quickly respond to this, because I think it's in line with what Councillor Hamlin was mentioning. There are a number of municipalities who are dealing with the same concern, and I was able to contact many of them, or as many as I knew of, who were engaged in this problem. So I feel like this is actually a really this makes a lot of sense by virtue of collecting a lot of people together who are struggling. A lot of these municipalities are dealing with it on their own. And I think that through AMO and through FCM, there's an opportunity to create a collective voice. So that's why these motions exist and look the way they do.
Follow up, Councillor Hamlin.
Yes, thank you for adding that, because in fact, I've had a councillor approach me from a small community north of Kingston who wants to know what we're doing because they're struggling with the very same issues. So I said I would report to her tomorrow on the outcome of tonight, but I do think that your report will get widely circulated. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Comey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, again, to pick up on a thread started by Councillor Hamlin. So my question is, when we go back out into the community and explain phrases like work with and engage, I would personally like a clear understanding of what that means. So is it beyond we're going to send an email one time to the general AMO and FCM mailbox, or we're going to speak directly to the president of FCM and AMO and actually, and I won't go there, that's what I wishfully hear, but I would appreciate through you, Mayor Saunderson, to Executive Director Culver, and perhaps if it's not you, Executive Director Culver, someone else can speak to it. What do we mean by work with? What do we mean by engage? To what extent?
I will look to Director Culver, but I will note that we have a member of our council who's running for AMO, and so we will be supporting Councillor Doherty in that role, and we have an FCM member at the table, and those are probably two of the most immediate ways to influence those organizations is to be on the board and the local caucuses. So I expect that our council members will be extremely involved in that. And with that said, I will pass it over to Director Culver.
Yeah, no, I thank you, Mr. Mayor. So how we, this is where my research stops, because I don't know how we work with AMO. I can commit to doing it, and I can commit to working, as the mayor said, with council members. I think that one of the reasons why this this approach rises to the top is, like I say, there are so many municipalities that are in the same boat, looking at the same challenges and trying to figure out how to manage them, that I believe through an associated network body like AMO, that this will become a part of their priority list. And I think that, you know, we'll be a part of that. We can bring that to them in by every method you mentioned, writing letters, talking to the president, looking for representatives on the AMO board. I think those are all feasible, doable, and the goal is to make it work. I think we're committing to something. And but in terms of what mechanisms exist, that's not something that I know at this moment. If it doesn't exist, we'll make it. We'll fix one. We'll find one.
You follow up, Councillor Comey?
Thank you for asking that, Mr. Mayor. So I feel Executive Director Culver gave the best answer he could, but I think I very much like to hear from you, Mayor Saunderson, Councillor Doherty, and Councillor Jeffrey, because how far can Executive Director possibly go? What role will some of these key people play in these words that we've put together? Because words are just that. Our residents were looking for the best action we can produce.
Well, I'll start first, and then I'll look to Councillors Doherty and Jeffrey. We in Simcoe County have a very active section of the AMO. We have the past president, Mayor Lynn Dolan at Innisfil, who's running again to be on the board. We have Treasurer Wilcox at the county, who was the treasurer for AMO. There are many intertwined political connections, but as well, for those who have attended the AMO conference, you know, there's opportunities to have delegations with MPPs and parliamentary secretaries. So there's a lot of opportunity to pursue those types of avenues at the relevant conferences, both AMO and FCM. And so I am very confident that we will be able to make meaningful forays into both AMO and FCM, who will then be our ambassadors, as well as ourselves, to both the provincial MPs and our federal MPs. And with that, I will look, I know Councillor Jeffrey had her card up. So Councillor Jeffrey, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Saunderson. I was actually under the FCM portion of the vote was going to bring up the fact that FCM, we have a national board meeting virtually, and we're just starting to plan for it. I think it's September 6th to 9th, or in around those dates somewhere. So how the process works with FCM is that the municipality forwards its motion to them, and they find the appropriate policy advisor and committee for that to be considered at. And it's one that I would be able to follow up in my attendance at that board meeting with the appropriate people to make sure that it gets considered by the body, the 74 board of directors, because it takes their authority to move it on and invest in the policy work. So that's how it works at FCM. Also, I have the pleasure of working with the president of AMO at FCM. They sit in the Ontario caucus with me, and we do have Ontario caucus meetings where we discuss things that are of a priority within Ontario. And so there's lots of connections and opportunities to move this forward, and I'll leave the rest to Councillor Doherty.
Councillor Doherty, I know you're not yet a member, but you are a member of the Waste Management Committee, and so have some dealings within AMO. So perhaps you can give us your perspective on the AMO.
I believe that Councillor Jeffrey has covered very well how it works at AMO. And I know that there has been some communication recently around the Black Lives Matter movement And I expect that there will be further discussion, certainly at the AGM. And I would hope that we would be sending our resolution tonight to them. And if I am successful, I will certainly advance that with the board. And if not, I will give it to someone who will. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Doherty. Any
Thank you,
follow-up,
Mayor
Councillor?
Saunderson. Well, I very much look forward to hearing those follow-ups. Thank you so much, Councillor Jeffrey and Councillor Doherty, for your answer. And I very much look forward to hearing follow-up when the time is appropriate. Thank you.
Councillor Doherty, did you have your hand up to speak on this issue before you call the vote?
No, I did not.
Okay. All right, then. I will call the vote on the second element, which is the advocacy work with AMO. All in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you. And then the third item, again moved by Councillor Comey and seconded by Councillor Doherty, and further, the council directs staff to engage the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, FCM, to petition and advocate with the federal government to strengthen hate speech laws, including providing clear definitions of hate speech within the criminal code, and enact legislation that identifies symbols of hate and provides mechanisms that would allow these symbols to be removed from Canadian communities. Are there any questions or comments, Council? Councillor Jeffrey, go ahead.
Sorry, thank you, Mayor Saunderson. Just that if this passes or when it passes, if I could be copied on the email to FCM with the motion, and then I can follow it up.
I think we can certainly arrange for that. Thank you. All right, I will then call the vote. All in favor? And that is carried unanimously. That brings us to our next item, and that again is moved by Councillor Coney and seconded by Councillor Doherty. And further, that council directs staff to make application to join the coalition of inclusive municipalities as a commitment to investing time and resources toward creating a more welcoming and inclusive community as part of a network of cities seeking to improve policies against racism, discrimination, exclusion, and intolerance. Council, questions or comments? Go ahead, Councillor McLeod.
With respect, Mr. Mayor, I think you missed two pieces.
We're going to go back to them. I just took them out of order. Councillor McLeod?
Thank you. Sorry about that.
No, no worries. Any questions or comments on this item, Council? I would like to say something about this issue. I came across this. This is part of a UN initiative, but this is the Canadian chapter of it. There's 82 municipalities across the country, but in Ontario, we are the most represented with larger metropolises like Toronto, Ottawa, London, Oshawa, Hamilton, as well as smaller municipalities like Oakville and Kingston, and a number of communities our size are all members of this. And to do it, you have to commit to a 10-point plan that covers many initiatives. And I see this as a very proactive step and a bit of a roadmap for us, not only within the community, but as ourselves as an employer within our own corporation here in Collingwood, to have equity and remove barriers within our own hiring policies. So I'm very much in favor of this. And having said that, I will call the vote then. All in favor? That is carried unanimously. Thank you. The next item will go back up and again moved by Councillor Comey and seconded by Councillor Doherty. And further, that council directs staff to implement the following amendment be made to the Town of Collingwood sign bylaw. And the addition reads, the town may, at its sole discretion, remove without notice or order removed any sign or decoration which has been determined is for an unlawful activity or contains profanity or obscenity or other message that is deemed offensive or discriminatory as defined in the Ontario Human Rights Code and or the Canadian Human Rights Act. Council, questions or comments? Councillor Doherty.
Thank you. This question would be through Executive Director Culver. In the discussion, there was reference to the fact that this amendment to the sign bylaw would reference commercial signs. And so my question is, can this also apply to other signage that may appear but not specifically of a commercial nature?
Okay, I don't know if Director Culver or Clerk Almas, who did bylaw for a while, who wants to address that issue.
Yeah, through your worship, I would defer that to Clerk Almas and I or CBO Miller, who are experts in how bylaws are applied. We did not approach this knowing it would affect non-commercial applications. So that's where I think what needed to be clear, and that was hopefully made clear through the report. But I'll defer to Clerk Almas if she's available.
Sarah?
Certainly, through your worship to members of council, the sign bylaw does cover signage for all properties in Collingwood. So we'd have to take a look at that particular section, but I believe it would be applicable to that as well. When we prepare the amendment bylaw, if this is passed by council, we'll ensure that that's noted so council is aware.
Any follow-up, Councillor Doherty?
No, thank you. That's good.
Okay. Councillor Hammond, you had a question, and I see you, Councillor McLeod, as well.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I support this addition to the sign bylaw. I think it's encouraging that it gives power to the town to remove any sign or decoration. I have had the opportunity to speak with representatives of some of those who've been most involved in this issue in our community, and they very much would like to see a change to the definition of the sign bylaw. I think very much speaking to the issue that Councillor Doherty has just raised. And I did, well, I'll just ask, I did speak to acting executive director Culver about this, and I'll just ask him to indicate his agreement with this change, and I'll just read. So that a sign, which currently I should just say is defined by reference to a business property on which it's located, right? So the definition I am proposing is one that's found in the sign bylaw for the town of Owen, or for the city of Owen Sound, and it reads as follows. Sign means any device, surface, structure, and other component part which is used or capable of being used as a visual medium to attract attention to a specific subject matter for identification, information, or advertising purposes. So I would be asking to amend this to make a further change to the sign bylaw to change the definition of sign to that which I've read. And my question is if Director Culver could comment on that. Thank you.
Before we do that, I'm just going to look to the clerk, because while we are dealing with the provisions, we are looking at adding a provision to the sign bylaw. I don't know that we are looking to examine all of the definitions and provisions of the sign bylaw and whether this comes under this report or would be deemed as a separate notice of motion. And certainly Councillor Hammond could put that notice of motion on the table today. So I will look to Clerk Almas for clarification on that.
Certainly, through your worship, you are correct that this would require two additional notice provisions we have to adhere to when we make changes to the sign bylaw, so that this is considered potentially out of the scope, because looking at definitions, we'd have to ensure that that change in definition wouldn't affect any of the other provisions that are provided for in that bylaw. So I think notice of motion would be the appropriate step for today.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. So Councillor Hammond, I think what we'll do is under notices of motion, I'll come back to you and you can put your notice of motion on the table for the amendment.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other, Councillor McLeod, I think you had your card up. Go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Executive Director Culver, and I too would like to commend you on this report. I already have, and I certainly hope that you do not send the town a bill for your anti-racism school that you have now attended. But I do thank you for your hard work. My question to you, Executive Director Culver, is when you were in conversation with officials and town workers in places like Barrie and Owen Sound who have already put in place some changes to their sign bylaws, did you have a conversation about how often they have dealt with enforcement, and can you talk a little bit about what their experiences have been so that we know what we might be in for in the next little while? or perhaps the bylaw itself is, or the change to the sign bylaw itself is deterrent enough.
Executive Director Culver.
So through your worship, in conversation with other municipalities about the application of their bylaw when with respect to offensive wording or things like that, I think that the bylaw presence itself, and as well, I think a lot of the conversation centered around simple common sense has kind of driven the way advertising and communication has kind of worked in accordance with the bylaw. In other words, it's not often you see somebody put offensive material on their sign and use it as a way to promote their business. So I think that that's that's fairly clear in terms of the conversations that I have had. I think early on there was some discussion about the sign bylaw as a method to look at other forms of hate speech, and I'm not aware of any challenge any time that a bylaw in Ontario has been used as a response to hate speech, and that and whether that's been successful. So I'm not 100% clear on the question, I think, but hopefully those two phases of answer have answered it.
Well, as a follow-up, what I kind of was looking for was whether in Barrie they've had, to remove 10 signs, or have they had to remove 3, or things like that, or was there a conversation that you had with those representatives?
Through your worship, I'm not aware of the number of times that they've actually enacted the bylaw or it's been challenged or used in that municipality. The conversations that I've had have been around sort of content in terms of whether it's effective or not, and what is effective and what's not effective. I will say that there are two ways to go about sign bylaws. One is sort of a blanket, this is what signs should look like and what they should and should not contain in our community. And the other one is a permit process, and ours is a permit process. So people apply. There is some blanket coverage through our bylaw, but mostly our bylaw is enacted when somebody applies to install a sign.
Thank you very much.
Council, any other questions? Oh, I saw CEO Skinner put her hand up, and I have seen you also as well, Councillor Berman, but first I'll let the CEO Skinner speak.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. And I also wanted to add that I had been in a conversation with the, I believe it was the clerk, or it may have been the former clerk, that it was reassigned to a different role in Barrie. And I think she had indicated that there either had been no or very limited application of their bylaw in Barrie, that it was good that it existed, but it hadn't been actively used and I haven't heard anything since then. That was about a month ago. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Berman.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. Through you, I guess the first one is just sort of semantics. What when it says sign or decoration, what's the definition of a decoration?
Director Culver.
For this purpose.
Yes.
I would have to look up the bylaw to find out how decoration is defined, if it is a definition. If you'd like me to do that, I definitely can. I've searched it enough times, I know exactly where to find it. But I actually don't have that at my fingertips. What is the definition of decoration as defined by our bylaw, if it is?
Okay, I'm not really concerned about that. I have the one concern. So you've referenced the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which it's fair to say, I think it's fair to say, supersedes the Ontario Human Rights Code and the Canadian Human Rights Act. Is that fair to say?
Well,
so thank you, through your worship. Technically, yes. I mean, technically, the way the government hierarchy works, the federal government has responsibility for the provincial governments, has responsibility for the municipal government. But they actually aren't formulated for the exact same purpose. The OHRC has a lot to do with employment law, has a lot to do with discriminatory behaviors in the workplace. And so they actually aren't the same device. They're not related in some senses of the word. What that does do for us in terms of this bylaw is it has a very clear definition of discrimination and discriminatory material. So it's nice to have that for the sake of enforcing a bylaw. So whoever's sort of I guess, determining whether a commercial sign is offensive or not, use what's described in the OHRC as a definition from which to make a decision about whether our bylaw applies or not.
Okay, so that, I guess that just leads me to the last question, and I have to choose my words carefully because it's relating to something that wasn't a public question. Is this the type of thing that if we were to enforce it, somebody challenged it, is the big, expensive monster that we don't ever want to have to deal with?
I'll let you take a stab at that, Dean. I mean, that's part of a legal question, but I guess if for clarification, Councillor Berman, are you asking if this bylaw can be used to remove hate symbols, or are you asking the scope of the bylaw? Like, maybe be a little more specific.
Yeah, I guess I'm asking it if the town were to use the bylaw and enforce it, what's the downside as far as how far somebody could go to challenge our right to enforce it?
Can I twist that a bit? Just, Dean,
Yeah,
maybe you can confirm if we had our town solicitors review the draft bylaw and provide an opinion about its enforceability. I guess maybe that's where Councillor Berman's headed.
Yes, I think so.
So through you, Your Worship, I think what's fair to comment on in terms of Councillor Berman's question is that this, from a charter perspective, this is a relatively innocuous change to our bylaw. It doesn't trigger a charter challenge by virtue of enforcing this bylaw. Because again, and maybe what I didn't do a good job of explaining is that the OHRC and the charter kind of work in concert in some respects, not specifically or deliberately, but by virtue of what areas they cover. And so if we were to enforce this bylaw based on a definition that's found in the OHRC, that definition, I don't believe, would be necessarily challengeable under the charter as a charter challenge. But as Mayor Saunderson said, I think probably it's a good idea, given your question, to confirm that with a lawyer. It's not necessarily, I'm just speaking from what I've researched and what I've learned, and why we thought it was a good idea to cover this gap within our bylaw. So I don't know that I want to say what I've said is definitive, as much as I think this is based on my understanding of how these two laws work together.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, first of all, I agree. I think through you, Mayor Saunderson, you know exactly what I'm asking, and you knew the words better than I do to ask it. So it is. I don't know how to phrase it otherwise, but probably Mayor Saunderson, through you know what I'm asking. Is this?
I see Director Culver's, and I think, and I understand. I guess Director Culver, I think what Councillor Berman's looking for is, was there involvement from our town solicitors in preparing this provision or reviewing it?
So our lawyer looked at this and had no issues.
Okay, perfect.
I would also say too that, sorry, through you, Your Worship, that the sign bylaw and this language fits within the realm of the municipality. This is identified in the Municipal Act as being amongst the powers that a municipality holds. So we're not even stepping out it from a standpoint of jurisdiction. So hopefully that helps as well.
That does, and that's great. And I apologize for not having better words to more quickly get the answer, but thank you to Mayor Saunderson for your help.
My pleasure. And Dean, I think you probably earned one of the fastest law degrees in the country. So this was a very technical aspect of the report. Are there any other questions or comments before I call the vote? Seeing none, then I will read it again. And it's moved by Councillor Coleman, seconded by Councillor Doherty. And further, that council directs staff to implement the following amendment be made to the town of Collingwood sign bylaw. The addition is the town may, at its sole discretion, remove without notice or order removed any sign or decoration which has been determined is for an unlawful activity or contains profanity or obscenity or other message that is deemed offensive or discriminatory as defined in the Ontario Human Rights Code and or the Ontario Human Rights or Canadian Human Rights Act. All in favor? And that again is carried unanimously. Thank you. So the final segment of the motion, moved by Councillor Comey and seconded by Councillor Doherty, and further that council directs staff to investigate the concept of a municipal charter of human rights as a local level vision enhancement and toolkit that would fundamentally redefine how the town approaches and responds to the social issues that affect the well-being of residents. Questions or comments, council? Seeing none, I have a question, and this is to the executive director. Dean, you spoke at length about the gathering circle, and we have heard that this is a large undertaking, and there's only one municipality, and that is in Quebec, which has a different municipal regime. And I am wondering if this might be something that could be, we should allow our residents through the gathering circle discussion to identify if this would be a priority for them. You identified how listening is essential. We have to understand the issues that are confronting us first. And I'm wondering if this is maybe something that we should revisit once we've had that conversation and understand what our local issues are.
Yeah, through your worship, that's exactly the approach that I would recommend us taking. I've read through the Montreal Charter, which I think was originated in 2012, I believe, and was updated in 2015. And it's comprehensive, but it's extremely made in Montreal. Like, it's extremely adapted to Montreal's situations. And I think that the gathering circle, that vessel, that opportunity, is exactly the kind of conversation we want to have to ensure that what we're doing fits with Collingwood's history and future, as defined by an understanding of the concepts of racism and discrimination and equity and diversity and inclusion within our own community. So yeah, absolutely, we have to have that conversation before, as a part of determining whether this is a feasible and good approach, as a beginning point, I would say.
Okay, so just for clarity, the recommendation is that we consider this, but we consider this in concert with our discussions that are going on with our residents, and when we have a better understanding of the specific issues, barriers, discrimination that exists in our community, that then we would look at, and staff would come back at that point in time with an idea of how this would be implemented.
Yeah, exactly right. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Any other questions, council? Seeing none, then I will call the vote. Oh, Councillor Comey has her hand up.
Thank you,
ahead,
Mr. Mayor. Thank you so much. Sorry, I had coffee in one hand, the other. So I apologize. I just want to make sure I'm really clear and I understand. So through you, please, Mr. Mayor, to Director Culver. So at this point, then we would hold off on applying to this coalition of inclusive municipalities, because there's mention that it comes with a toolkit.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Comey, we're at the direct staff to investigate the concept of the municipal charter. We're at the paragraph above. I took them out of order, just thought we'd go for the low-hanging fruit first.
I apologize, Mr. Mayor. Thank you so much.
Okay. All right. Any other questions or comments? All right, then I will call the vote. All in favor? And this is also carried unanimously. And I'd just like to thank Executive Director Culver and all staff involved. This has been an extremely comprehensive and labor-intensive process, and you've turned it around extremely quickly. And I'm hopeful that our residents will be happy with the direction we're taking, and that we will start to see changes in our community, much-needed changes. So thank you, Executive Director, and all staff involved. All right, so that brings us then to item 6.2, C 2020-10, Bill 197. And the motion is moved by Councillor Doherty and seconded by Councillor Berman. Be it resolved that staff report C 2020-10 with respect to Bill 197 and electronic meeting participation be received, and that council enact and pass a bylaw to further amend procedural bylaw number 2019-75 and to provide for electronic participation as outlined therein. And I will pass it over to Clerk Almas to take us through this. Go ahead, Sarah, please.
Certainly, through your worship. I can confirm that last week, Bill 197 received royal assent. So that provided a few additional provisions for various areas. And with respect to electronic meeting participation, it allowed for municipalities to carry on with this electronic meeting participation outside of a declared state of emergency. So it was a bit of a last minute act that was put in place. I was kind of at the end of the week a little panicked with the thought that our procedural bylaw is tied to notice requirements as well. However, there is a provision that allows less notice. So as soon as we had prepared the report and the bylaw to go forward on Thursday, we provided public notice on Friday. And we are able to make this change. Right now, we are able to carry on. So our meeting on Monday, even though the provincial declaration had ceased on Friday, the county of Simcoe carries on theirs. But if for some reason at that point that the county removes their declaration, unless we do this change, we would not be able to carry on. So I have identified 4 specific reasons why and how electronic participation would be permitted. So that includes if it is not safe or possible to attend an in-person meeting due to a natural weather event, health and safety restrictions as determined by the CAO in consultation with the mayor or town emergency control group, restrictions set out by the health unit or the police, or the activation of the emergency control group. So those are the provisions that we have identified at this point in moving forward with electronic participation. And the bill also allowed for municipalities to consider establishing proxy voting. So that's something at this point we're aware that we have the permission to amend our bylaw further if that's something we want to consider. However, I have not done an analysis on that piece, and probably would not be recommending it at that point unless I had some direction from council to do so.
Thank you, Sarah. Councillor, questions or comments on this issue? Councillor McLeod? Councillor Comey?
Thank you. So my understanding is that the provincial emergency orders have come to an end, but the county ones have not. And so until the county orders come off, we are meeting by Zoom, or we are allowed to meet by Zoom or WebEx or whatever. But once the county's emergency is over, we can only have these 4 reasons to attend electronic.
So, sorry, just for clarity. So once we pass this bylaw, we're covered whether they end theirs or not.
Thank you. My concern though is that there may be a time when a council member is able to pay attention to a meeting and to vote, but they may not feel as though they ought to be in public. Perhaps they are infectious with the flu or something like that. Is there a provision whereby it can be a councillor's choice to attend or not, to attend a meeting electronically rather than merely these 4? Or are these 4, is it the CAO's permission, I guess, is that where that's covered?
Almas?
Certainly, through your worship to Councillor McLeod, it would have to be something of a significant nature that you would infect your colleagues with, but we are not thinking, whether you're on vacation or out of town or just a general sickness, that this would apply for that purpose.
Thank you. And not to put too fine a point on it, but if one were to travel to someplace and come back and need to quarantine for 2 weeks, that might include a meeting, but our emergency orders may be over. What would happen in that situation?
Sarah?
Certainly, through your worship to Councillor McLeod, I would suggest that would still fall within the health and safety restrictions. And again, that would be something that would be reviewed with the CAO and the mayor. But I think that would be something that would be considered.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Comey, you had your card up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, it's a continuation through you to Mayor Saunderson to Clerk Almas of Councillor McLeod's thoughts on this. I suppose, I think what she was reaching for, and I want to make sure I understand, these amendments, these 4 categories, or did they come down from the health unit and part of the larger bill, or this is what staff is recommending? Because it's very overtly excludes COVID emergency order or not. And to expand on that thought, you could, whether now or in the future, have a counselor with an immune deficiency or any other concern that they felt, regardless of the state of emergency, it was not ideal for them to attend in person. Where would that speak to this concern?
Certainly through Mayor Saunderson. So as we've identified in the bylaw, we want to ensure that every effort is made by council to attend all meetings in person. However, if there is something of a significant nature that needs to be considered that would fall in line with health and safety risks, or something that's through the health unit or the province, that would be taken into consideration. Obviously, establishing an in-person meeting together with having a combined electronic participation, it wouldn't look like it does right now today in the Zoom meetings. We would have to undertake a process on figuring out how best to do that. As you're aware, one of the meetings that we had held prior to making the last change to the procedural bylaw, we used a teleconference call in front of the mayor's table. So we'd have to be able to find something that works good for those that have to participate electronically, and work good for the viewers wanting to watch or participate if it's a standing committee or a public planning meeting, as well as those that would potentially be back in the gallery.
Director Skinner, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I did want to add as well that due to the impending end of the emergency provisions and this very quick Bill 197, the clerk did a great job putting together, like, how can we continue to meet sort of at what we hope is the end portions of COVID. Should council, as electronic meeting understandings mature, want to look at a change to our overall policies and practices with respect to meeting electronically or not, accommodating people who are out of town. I think that's another policy review that certainly, upon council's direction at some point in the future, I would suggest maybe as we got a little more mature with this type of meetings, it might be appropriate to look at. However, the intention today was to allow us to continue to meet in this type of a forum for the next several months as COVID needs made it important for us to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, CAO Skinner. Go ahead, Sarah, you want to add to that?
Yeah, just a final comment that this wasn't something specifically that I had looked at. These are not just mine. We had consultation with other county clerks, and many clerks are passing us recommending similar bylaws across the county with this type of provision.
Thank you, Clerk Almas and CEO Skinner. And through you, Mr. Mayor, as a follow-up thing, because I see these 4 reasons, but it seems these reasons leave the final decision as determined by the CAO in consultation with the mayor. But then it goes on to say, members shall advise the clerk as soon as practical prior to the scheduled meeting of his or her intent to participate electronically. So that's where it's not entirely clear to me. Is it at the member's discretion whether or not they deem it appropriate to attend in person? Or are we saying the elected representative must get permission from the CAO to attend remotely?
I think it depends on the circumstances. If it comes under one of the 4 headings and all of council's meeting remotely, I don't think it's a consideration. If there are compelling personal reasons that would require a one-off, I think that's when it gets vetted by the CAO with myself and the input from the clerk. Sarah, can you clarify?
I would concur with Mayor Saunderson. So again, this is something that in consultation with my colleagues was, and I think the fear of, clerks and residents as well, constituents, we don't want this unique opportunity to be abused. And I think that we would just be cautious of the particular conversations. But yes, if there, you would have to get permission through the consultation with the mayor and the CAO and ensure that I'm advised so we can technically set up the appropriate arrangements.
That's really interesting. Okay, thank you for your answer.
Council, any further questions or comments before I call a vote? Seeing none, all in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you. The next item is 6.3, the CAO 2020-9 COVID-19 Economic Recovery Task Force report plan support for action items 3 and 5. And I'll read it in, and then I think we're being joined by Director Rydlo. So it is moved by Councillor Berman and seconded by Councillor Jeffrey. Be it resolved that staff report CAO 2020-9 COVID-19 Economic Recovery Task Force plan support for action item 3, round bracket business and tourism relaunch marketing, and action item 5, round bracket shop local incentive, end bracket, be received, and that the attached business and tourism relaunch marketing plan, Appendix A, be approved as a general framework for a 4-month local marketing campaign that ensures Collingwood remains a top-of-mind 4-season destination and encourages people to explore local and shop local. And further, the council approved $75,000 from the $2.5 million Collingwood Emergency Contingency Fund be allocated to the local business and tourism relaunch marketing plan. And further, that the consultant's feasibility report shop local gift card be received, that's Appendix B. And further, the council endorse reviewing options to potentially implement a shop local incentive program once the next economic recovery dashboard is presented. And with that, I will turn it over to Director Rydlo. Martin.
Thank you very much, Mayor Saunderson, members of the council. What I was hoping to do today was just give you a brief summary of the 32-page staff report, because there is certainly a lot of information in there. Specifically, what I was hoping to do, and we can go to the next slide, is focus on action items number 3 and 5 from the approved Economic Recovery Task Force plan. And specifically, that is business and tourism relaunch marketing, as well as the shop local incentive program. I did want to just remind you of some of the insights that came out of the dashboard that we had a chance to recently take a look at. First of all, the rebound seems to be happening. Interest in Collingwood is back to where it was pre-COVID. In fact, some of the tracking is showing it to be a bit higher. The second insight I want to just bring forth from last time is we need to watch the workforce. We are seeing some reopenings happen in the key hospitality, food service, tourism, arts businesses, and we have the opportunity to quickly and significantly improve the overall unemployment rates. Along with the booming construction business, we are in a position where we could be in a very good rebound position as we come out of the summer. And that is where we are putting a lot of emphasis on watching what the dashboard presents to us in September so that we can continue to evolve this economic recovery plan. If we go to the next slide, before I go into action items 3 and 5, I did want to take a minute to just take a look at all the economic recovery efforts that have been made possible by the Business Development Center, by the various town departments, and by partner organizations. There's 17 different big activities that we have either accomplished or are in the process of managing. One that I want to draw your attention to that relates to the Main Street modernization project that we talked about several weeks ago. We did receive confirmation from RED that we are the lucky recipients of a $150,000 grant for the digital discovery platform. So I want to congratulate the whole team that's working on that, in particular, Sue Nicholson from the BIA, who actually was instrumental in organizing and writing the grant submission. I also want to highlight the results from action item number 6 related to supporting social services. I know that's been a topic today. And in particular, and in addition to the points that are here, SharePoint digital platforms have been a key point of collaboration for the roundtable, underlying the importance of digital technology in our recovery efforts. And I also want to highlight the Optimist Club for the tremendous efforts they've put forward in terms of making sure that we have a ready supply of PPE within the community. Okay, on to action item number 3. If you recall, action item number 3 was about driving a long-term marketing promotional plan that complements our strategic plan to ensure Collingwood remains a top-of-mind four-season destination. Ultimately, we want to get back to our pre-COVID levels by the end of 2021. The task force recommended a two-pronged marketing campaign specifically, one targeted locally and the other one reaching out to the GTA and Southwestern Ontario, if you will, to bring more people here. Go to the next slide. Let me give you an overview of the recommendation. What we're recommending is using a campaign brief that's included in the staff report under Appendix A as a foundation for what we've called the Go Get Out marketing campaign. The call to action encourages people to go get out of their houses, to live more now in Collingwood, and thrive by immersing themselves into this outdoors-oriented community by spending money in its many local stores, restaurants, and with their artists. What's important about this is that you'll see a number of key terms in here that resonate back to the community vision that was approved as part of the community-based strategic plan earlier this year. The other thing I want to highlight is there are already lots of people coming here and living here. So the opportunity really is to promote the various things to do in Collingwood to those people that are already coming here. And that's an important point in terms of the overall recommendation, which relates to focusing first on the locally targeted marketing campaign and leaving the second one, which targets the GTA and Southwestern Ontario, for a later time based on what we see happening with economic recovery. I'll be honest, this represents a significant investment for the community. But I also need to put into context, it dwarfs what other major tourism and businesses spend in getting people to experience their experiences here in South Georgian Bay. It also represents an investment that incorporates best practices in developing high impact marketing campaigns. Specifically, of the $75,000, we've allocated $10,000 to have a creative team work on developing the specific ads, if you will, and the media plan. We've allocated almost $20,000 to the production of the ads, websites, videos, social media, making sure we integrate that with local businesses and make sure we have local imagery. $35,000 is for actually investing into the media dollars, the mediums that carry the message. And last but not least, approximately $10,000 is allocated to Google Maps, directional signage, and digital tracking of the campaign. So at every step of the way, we can tell how things are going. I want to underline the importance of the Google Maps component to this campaign. Right now, the most efficient way for people to find out about what to do around Collingwood is held in our hands. Right now, if you search things to do in Google Maps, you'll see that there's some good things in there, but a lot of them are missing. Some of them, including Sunset Point, are not managed by us. We don't have all of our parking spaces showing on there, and we don't have some of the key experiences showing on there. So part of this campaign is actually focused on helping to manage our Google Maps profile. So when people go things to do in Collingwood, they do see the kinds of experiences that we profile at discovercollingwood.ca. We'll go to the next slide. I did want to share some more specific examples of what we are looking to do. The ad over here is purely a concept only, but you see that it captures the essence of go, get out in a very creative, modern fashion. And it also taps into that live more now idea that we've captured within the community vision. The key media that we're looking to target are those that we know we have proven success with based on all the marketing we've been doing for events, the businesses, and the municipality. And this includes a heavy focus on social media, engaging digital influencers, out of home, which includes highway signs, posters, radio, Google My Business via collaboration with the Digital Service Squad, directional signage to make sure people know where to find those less trafficked areas. And as I mentioned, a heavy emphasis on the Google search maps and making it easier to find those less popular, special experiences that we know exist here in Collingwood. I also want to introduce you to a new experience we want to be bringing forth to Collingwood called Patiolicious. Believe it or not, we're the first ones to actually own that URL. And it's going to be a platform for our patios, our restaurants that have been working so hard to get back to business, to get profiled through this campaign that we're recommending spans from the middle of August through to the end of September. And it's based on the very successful Whiskey-licious platform. Essentially, we're taking it and we're changing it over to Patio-licious. It will be available for all food and beverage businesses in Collingwood that have a patio, but would also be working closely with the BIA so they can put on an extra layer for the downtown area businesses. And the good news, the dollars for Patio-licious are already approved within 2020 base budget. We're just shifting those dollars to reallocate them to a different marketing effort. Side launch, for example, is one that we're just not seeing happen in the same kind of way. So we're just shifting those dollars around. So this is something that we can do within existing foundational dollars. Let's move on to the next action item, which is action item number 5. And the objective here was to make sure we can drive traffic and sales into local businesses, retail stores, and service, with the goal of making sure there's no more than a 30% reduction in small retail and service businesses. If we go to the next slide, as you recall, council approved going out and having a consultant take a look at a recommended approach that was put together by staff in response to the task force to go, is this feasible? Because the potential dollars that are needed to make this cash card happen are significant, and they carry with them significant risk. But we went out, we asked a consultant that's actually had a chance to work on retention programs with Amex, with Chapters Indigo, and a number of other recognized companies. So they bring a real good realm of expertise to the fore here in terms of what they said. And basically they broke it down into 3 things. Is the shop local gift card idea feasible? Yes, with some caveats. There's certainly systems and technologies that need to be worked on to make sure that it's a secure system, that we don't run into a problem of fraud. $100 cash cards being sent out to individual homes do carry risk with it. Merchant IDs would need to be set up to make sure that those cash cards are only redeemable in Collingwood businesses that are part of this program. And last but not least, the best equipped companies to actually help us with this program may see this as an actually small program for them and may not be interested in it. The second question was, what financial benefit can we expect from the program? Based on the consultant's analysis, she concluded that it would represent about $60,000 to $90,000 in incremental profit to Collingwood businesses specifically. And that's using some base assumptions from her retail expertise to calculate that out. So yes, would it be sales? Would it be incremental sales? Yes, hopefully. But it was important to bring it down to the profit number. And this is certainly the way a business would evaluate this kind of a program. This obviously does not recognize the emotional, social benefits that would come out of putting forth a $100 cash card. But that was not part of the scope of work for the consultant specifically. The last question was, is this the most effective way to accomplish this objective? And her conclusion was, there are better alternatives. And she listed 4 specifically. The red box that you're seeing on your screen is actually shifted a little bit. The 2 that as staff we looked at and we said, you know what? There are probably better ways of addressing this is the rent relief program. And specifically, we already have a federal program that's out there, the CSRA program. And that is having certain challenges, but it is out there for people and rent relief. And furthermore, the task force did not recommend this specific aspect or tactic as part of the task force recommendations, although it was considered. The second one that we looked at, but thought, you know what, may not be right for us, is participating in an existing program, because the cost of participation in this is significant. So working with a larger company that does this all over North America and saying, look, can you do something and adapt it for Collingwood? So what we ended up doing was actually looking at the other 2 that were remaining. If we go to the next slide, you will see the analysis that we've done of the 2 other ones. The first one being a longer-term loyalty program, and the other one is expanding existing initiatives. The longer-term loyalty program that we identified as an opportunity was actually putting together a local shop and win passport. And the idea here is that you'd go around, you'd shop, and it was a bit of a gamified experience, whereas you shop at more places, you win extra cash prizes, you get extra badges of honor, and it allows for digital integration. but it also offers a scratch and win component for non-digital experiences in stores. The other one was expanding an existing initiative base. And what we came out here was actually combining the Go Get Out marketing campaign into a self-guided events or experience platform. And this platform would essentially help people discover Collingwood, and it would actually link into the digital discovery platform that we've gotten $150,000 for. And it would also ensure that participating businesses could get listed at a place like Collingwood Commons, so it'd be an easy shopping platform to work for. Would use a digital service squad to make sure it integrated together. So two very interesting opportunities. At the end of the day, we step back, and if we go to the next slide, our recommendation to council tonight is to continue to monitor the economic recovery dashboard to see where Collingwood is at in September, and review the Shop Local incentive program and the different options that we've evaluated so far to see what we should be doing at that point based on the results of the dashboard. We're certainly recommending staying focused on developing the digital discovery platform, because this could be a significant foundation for the marketing campaign, but it could also be one for the Shop Local incentive. And last but not least, we want to continue to improve the digital footprint of businesses through the digital service squad, because we've seen that be a proven business growth driver. And now businesses have $2,500 actually they can access to help them increase that digital footprint. So with that, I would like to open it up for questions relative to the recommendation before you tonight.
Thank you, Martin, for that update. There's a lot going on, and congratulations on that grant. That's a big item. And with that said, I will look to council for questions and comments on the report. I've got Councillor McLeod and then Councillor Hamlin.
Thanks so much. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to our treasurer. We agreed earlier this evening to spend $9,000 more from the COVID recovery plan, and in front of us now is an additional $75,000. And I wonder if the treasurer could perhaps refresh my memory on just how much we've already spent from the COVID funding that we set aside.
Treasurer Leonard.
Through you, Your Worship. I haven't reconciled it lately, but to the best of my recollection, it was somewhere around $335,000 prior to this. Now, the reason I haven't had it reconciled is that we've had some additional operating expenses that have gone through on our checks for this month. So that's one of those Friday jobs that I like to save for. So.
Friday jobs, I love it. Thank you.
Follow up?
Yes, please. So I'm trying to reconcile what has happened and what these decisions have been made by this council in the last few weeks with what it is that's being presented tonight, and I'm having trouble squaring that circle, because it seems to me the metrics that Director Rydlo has provided to us are that things are looking good, that our recovery is better than many places, and home sales are up, and building permits are up, and interest in town is up, which is all fantastic news. At the same time, we are being overrun by tourists. So much so that we've had to change how our parking works in many places. And people who have been shut in for months and months in their homes and who still can't go to a movie theater are coming here. And so I don't see how spending $75,000 to entice more people here is going to help us. And we're already recovering well. And so I wonder if in 40 or 50 seconds you could explain to me, Director Rydlo, how I circle that square, or square that circle. You know what I meant.
Pardon? Go ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Saunderson. If you recall, the original recommendation by the Task Force for Action number 3 said a two-pronged strategy, right? One targeting local, one being targeted locally to just get people that are already here shopping local, and the other one, which was in fact reaching out and saying, let's get more people coming here. What we're recommending is let's not do that second one right now. Let's leave that for later. Rather, let's focus on the first one as a way of not only getting people to actually go into stores and experience the stores that are here, but also explore the other experiences beyond the ones that pop up on social media as the high traffic areas like Sunset Point and Millennium Park. We believe that this investment will actually help get people to explore other areas of town and actually address some of the very issues that I know have been at the forefront of council's agenda over the last few weeks. I'm hoping that helps provide a little bit of context around how we'd be structuring this campaign and focusing it, a very locally focused campaign.
Thank you. So just to repeat back to you, what I think you just said to me is that we're going to spend this money on encouraging Collingwooders and Clearviewites and Meaford people to spend their money in Collingwood, not people from North Bay or North York. Okay.
Through you, Mayor Saunderson, that is absolutely correct.
Thank you. My second question to you regarding this, what comes to the gift card program, and I remember we had a conversation, or I brought this up, or somebody did anyway, along the way when we were talking about this gift card idea that non-property taxpayers, and by that I mean renters, were excluded in how it was looking. Did the consultant, who is now saying yes, but it can work, but only if you do X, Y, Z, ABC. Did they look at how to include the 28% of people who live in town who don't pay property taxes because they don't own their property?
They did. It was a follow-up discussion with the consultant. And the approach that was recommended was that people that are renting in Collingwood come to town hall, present some form of confirmation that their residence in Collingwood, be a driver's license or something like that, and that those would be handed out on an individual basis to make sure that those that were missed out in the mail out could still have access to this program. And we have fairly good numbers in terms of percentage breakdowns between renters versus homeowners, if you will. So that was certainly something that we developed as a potential tactic to help those that wouldn't receive it directly.
Terrific. Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hamlin.
Yes, thank you, Director Rydlo, for this great report. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I was wondering, you mentioned the 17 major items that your department has been working on to support our local business. Can we get a copy of that list?
Pardon?
Through you, Mayor Saunderson, I don't see any reason why not, but I will just follow up with CAO Skinner afterwards just to confirm that. And I just did want to note that that is an overall summary of effort that's been put in place coming out of the task force recommendations. And it's certainly not only my team's efforts or the Business Development Center efforts. It has been a cross-departmental effort. Jennifer Parker has been doing a tremendous job with action item number 6. PRC and the staff have been doing a tremendous job with action item number 4. And it's really been a wonderful collaborative effort. So I'm trying to just present it on behalf of the overall team working on economic recovery.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to say, I find it difficult, we hear about all the initiatives coming from our different departments, and it's hard to keep track of them. And sometimes I know we're asked, well, what is the town doing anyway about all of this? And that's why I think it would be helpful to, if you could share that list with council. So I'll leave that with you. My second question is on the Patiolicious initiative, which I think is a great idea. In terms of the restaurants that don't have a patio currently, as you were speaking, I was thinking about another item on our agenda tonight, which is continuing a pilot on Simcoe Street between St. Marie and St. Paul's Street. But of course, that leaves the block between here, Ontario, and St. Marie. And I was wondering if you had given any thought to whether that block could be used for perhaps vending, I don't know what to say, patios that could be set up on the spot for those, who don't otherwise have access.
Through Mayor Saunderson, it's certainly an opportunity. It was interesting being out there on Saturday and seeing that vacant area and thinking what other businesses could be there. As you'll see in the presentation that we're going to give in a few minutes, there are certainly opportunities for businesses to take advantage of that space. And it's something that we've certainly given some consideration. There is always an opportunity or a way of making it happen. We've seen a number of creative ways that our local restaurants have been able to make patios work for them.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Doherty.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Not a question, but really a comment that this is an excellent continued evolution of the task force's 37 recommendations. And although it in some places looks like a very significant investment against what appears to be a fairly good recovery at the moment, we must never forget that our local small businesses were virtually out of business for the first 2 quarters of this year. And there is a lot of ground to cover for them to get back to a point of profitability, number one, and to get all of their staff back and working.
Go ahead, Director Rydlo.
Thank you, Councillor Doherty. You did remind me of one extra point I want to make. The campaign that we're recommending would span through the holiday season. And as you know, for retailers, that holiday season is where you actually make your money. That's where you make your profit. The rest of the year is just to cover off your expenses. So with what's happened this year, where they haven't had several months to cover off their expenses, this holiday season is going to be particularly important. We don't know about what's happening with the Santa Claus parade. We don't know what's going to be the overall situation, but we do know that those retailers and the service sector is going to be hungry for making sure they can have the best kind of sales they have. So looking at the local community that is here, that's living here part-time, full-time, is, I think, an opportunity for us to leverage this campaign to make sure that over the next 4 months, we provide some vital sectors with that additional support so that they can pull through to the end of the year.
Thank you. Councillor Comey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Director Rydlo, just to continue to echo that sentiment, to thank you and your team for all the hard work. And as Councillor Doherty mentioned, what life-saving work it really is for our small businesses. I want to make one sort of point. I'm not familiar with Google mapping and how you implement all that, but I noticed in the proposed ad campaigns or the draft, the SUP, which is awesome. And so I'm just going to offer a comment that, especially if we're going local or just around, that various launch points, perhaps like more than the one crowded launch point at Sunset or a couple others, be expanded so residents actually know where they can go, participate in water activities. To Councillor McLeod's point about certain areas really getting overcrowded. So that was something I wanted to offer there. And then I have a question, please, through you, Mr. Mayor, about the motion itself that potentially you can answer. It's about the gift card feasibility report. And as I've said all along, I would do anything to support our small businesses, but I have concerns with what's been noted all along, in particular, the 500 hours of staff time and the use of taking taxpayers' money and essentially giving it back to them through out of only the 400 out of 3,299 businesses that were cited in the original report we received. Leads me to this. The next sort of ideas that the task force is looking at talk about incentive programs and continuing that, but do we still have that sort of more, what I consider a narrow focus, or does it have potential to expand to a broader community of what we consider our businesses?
I'll let the director answer, but to be clear, it's not the task force that's looking at this, is staff now. The task force made their recommendations, so staff are carrying them forward. But Martin, can you answer that specific question, please?
Through Mayor Saunderson, the options that we're looking at remain fairly focused in terms of a key sector or several sectors that through the dashboard and through other surveys we've seen have been most affected. And so we're trying to carry forward with the observations we've had most recently, as well as the direction that we got from the task force. Certainly in sending out a $100 cash card, there's a lot of expenses that go into it that might get directed in somewhat different ways in other ways that we implement the programs. At this point, I'll be honest, it's a bit too early to go, could some of those other alternatives have a broader reach and help other businesses? Certainly a foundation that doesn't rely solely on having specific Collingwood business have to subscribe to a certain platform helps open it up more. But again, there's a myriad of complexities that then go in that in terms of making sure that there are the appropriate recipients. So I know I'm not necessarily answering the direct question, but I'd say it's something that we should take into consideration come September when we're looking at the dashboard and as we continue to evaluate the shop local incentive.
That's completely fair through you, Mr. Mayor. Director Rydlo, I would appreciate that. And I should have offered it potentially more as a comment for consideration because it did seem fairly narrow out of the sum total of potential businesses. And as a follow-up, based on the consultant's recommendation, then since better ideas were proposed, are we saying that this idea is now off the table?
Pardon?
Through you, Mayor Saunderson, I would not say it's off the table. What we wanted to do was to explore some of those other options that the consultant recommended so that we could understand them a bit more fully and scope them out a little bit more. So at this point, we're saying the shop local incentive, we have a number of options now that we evaluate. Actually, we've got 5 on the table for you, considering the original one plus the other 4 that the consultant recommended. So once again, I would say that come September, once we see where the dashboard is at, we've got 5 potential ways that we could activate it. And we'll have to wait and see what the dashboard presents.
Thank you, Director Rydlo. So I'll say it's certainly far reaching. I mean, it seems we had the lowest number, if I recall, one of the slides was $50,000 all the way up to $1.2 million. So that's certainly going to be a lot for council to digest when it finally comes back. So again, thank you for your presentation this evening.
Council, any additional comments or questions? Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Just a couple of general comments to the director and perhaps to the CAO. First, I would just echo comments made prior by my colleagues that I'm appreciative of the work done to date, specific to this portfolio. I'm appreciative of all the work that's been done by staff to all of the various reports that have been tabled this evening and to be tabled. I just wanted to go back to the outset, and this is not directed at Councillor MacLeod, but it was Councillor MacLeod that commented on sort of, and rightfully so, you know, the outward appearance is that things seem to be progressing relatively well within our community. You know, the real estate market is beyond strong. There seems to be relative strong faith in consumer spending, consumer confidence. Our outdoor patios are being utilized and experienced, and you go places and you see lineups, etc., and you hear of the things like the lineups up at the resort, for example, at Blue, which would indicate that not only are locals, but people from outside of the community coming and enjoying what the area as a whole has to offer. But I temper that enthusiasm by just stating that the deferrals of mortgages have yet to kick in. The end of the CERB has yet to kick in, and other government programs. And there is a day of reckoning coming where these things will come to a head, and the various sources, the chartered banks in particular, which quite frankly, in my own opinion, have done no one any favors with the programs that they have offered, really will have people scrambling. And that is where I'm hoping that as we allow the director to continue to sort of navigate down this chart or this path, that we will have some stimulants that we can actually inject into our local economy that will truly benefit the tax base, but also the residential base of the community as a whole. Because the picture we see today I'm not entirely confident, although I believe that COVID is slowly, dissipating. From an economic standpoint, it's not behind us entirely. And one fine example to that would be just the hospitality industry. We were very thankful that they could open patios, and I think that council did an excellent job in extending bylaws to allow for them to extend their footprint. We're not going to be using patios in November. And if all of a sudden they lose that space, but they only have 50% occupancy or 40% occupancy within their existing footprint, that's when it's going to hit the fan. And that's when we need these types of programs in place to, really encourage people to get out and continue to support our local economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any other council members who have not commented so far want to comment? Go ahead, Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. At the risk of being repetitive, I did have the opportunity to speak with two different businesses over the weekend, and one had closed their business after 63 years of being open in Collingwood, just couldn't make it past the COVID stretch. And another business I was speaking to who alluded to the fact that they won't make it if there's a second wave or a second closure. So our picture isn't as rosy as we would like it to be. And I think that the spin-off to the other types of business other than hospitality and tourism, kind of the supporting structure around them in terms of their business supplies or office, but we're going to have to find a way to drive the economy so they're included as well. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, so I do echo and agree with the comments of the Deputy Mayor and Councillor Jeffrey. I think we have fared better than many, but our numbers are still, we've been harder hit in some sectors than the county average. So, and I think that's being reflected along Main Street. And in fact, I had an email today from a business owner on the street complaining that charged parking will be in force again this coming Tuesday. So I think margins are tight for a lot of businesses, and I think maintaining a watchful eye on the dashboard and seeing how things evolve and not closing any doors at this point in time is I think the wisest way to proceed. And I see value in the advertising campaign on the Shop Local, and I know that there are other municipalities that are doing so, and you can hear they're on the radio. City of Aurelia has ads on a local radio station. So I think we need to be vigilant, and we need to keep driving on this and watch how things evolve, because it is an ongoing risk. So that said, I will call the vote. All in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you. Next up, we have item 6.4, the Ethnic Mosaic Alliance call for interest in a multicultural center. And I'll get it on the table, and then I will pass it over to the CAO. And it is moved by Councillor Jeffrey and seconded by Councillor Hamlin. Whereas Collingwood's vision and community-based strategic plans set out an inclusive, multi-generational art community that recognizes and celebrates Collingwood's growing ethnic diversity. And whereas the Waterfront Master Plan is updated through the concepts for the A1 Gathering Place, notionally suggests a proposal for an A1 Center to provide further cultural context to the Gathering Place site. Therefore, be it resolved that Council receive report CAO 2020-8 Ethnic Mosaic Alliance call for interest in a multicultural center, and further that Council asks staff to submit a letter of interest signed by the Mayor or designate that Collingwood has a strong interest in diversity and inclusion and would embrace the presence of a multicultural center, and that land in the community would be made available subject to confirmation of sustainable funding, including from other levels of government, and to collaboratively developing the concepts with the Ethnic Mosaic Alliance as a win-win for both parties. So Sonia, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Your Worship. You'll recall that we received in the consent agenda quite recently a letter from the Ethnic Mosaic Alliance, and I was asked to with staff take a look at this and see if it was in more detail something that council might wish to submit interest in. And having looked at it, you've just seen the proposed motion, which does indicate in submitting a letter. Some of the things that we looked at was a staff report, and a link is provided in the meeting materials to Simcoe County Council from Manager Sandra Lee, which was submitted in October of 2019, and it was related to supporting the funding application by the Ethnic Mosaic Alliance, and provided a lot more information about the proposal and the countywide support for it and for the funding application. I was also able to contact via email the woman who had written the original letter, and it does offer a business case for the proposed facility. So we did review the business case and provided a few bullets in the background. And it does talk about what it would be used for, that it would be offices, would be a modestly sized building with some public facilities with early estimated costing up to about 9 million. And that the business case shows it to be self-supporting pending the donation of the land for the center itself. And I thought that the description was quite interesting, and it says that it will be designed to stand out, embracing light, a tapestry of colors, finishes, such as wood and glass, flowing spaces with transitional and innovative barriers, walls that would allow freedom and flexibility to host a multitude of events in a welcoming and inclusive and multicultural educative environment. So Sandra Lee actually pointed me to some information that that others had provided as well when we were talking, but it's the 2016 immigrant and recent immigrant profile that supports that we have a diverse population here. There are a number of strategies, plans, and studies that support multiculturalism and community spaces, such as our strategic plan, the Parks, Recreation, and Culture Master Plan, and to mention two. As well, there has been a study endorsed by Council, as you're all very aware, which is the Arts and Culture Center Feasibility Study. Unfortunately, we don't have the results of that yet to influence your decision on whether this is in line with the needs that study may or may not indicate. I did also have a short discussion with the PRC director and the one of our stakeholders, which was the case group who are advocating for an arts and culture space. At first blush, they thought perhaps the space may get quite large if they started to marry this need with their performing spaces. However, they thought that should this Ethnic Mosaic Alliance facility go somewhere else, that they'd be very interested in an arts and culture center space in Collingwood being a satellite location. One of the requirements is the donation of land. So should council wish to put in a letter, we would essentially be committing to the donation of land for that. There is a diagram in the report that shows near the Alwyn gathering circle, there is a notional idea of a community space there, and that could be one space that's available. But we could also seek, as I believe it was Councillor Hamlin mentioned in the first discussion on this, a private donation of land elsewhere, or for that matter, the purchasing of a suitable site as a Collingwood contribution. There's no immediate effect on the town finances other than several days of staff resources. There is an assessment that would occur. I think Collingwood would be relatively well assessed in some of the conversations I've had. And should you not be at all interested in this, then please vote accordingly on the recommendation today. I think that should we take this step today, there are still several off-ramps that could happen throughout this process. For example, the funding doesn't come through from the province and the federal government. We don't come to a win-win agreement. with the proponent, or potentially they're not satisfied with the land that's provided. So this really gets us on the path, should you accept it, but it certainly is not the end of the journey. For your consideration, and thank you.
Thank you, CEO Skinner. Council, questions or comments? Councillor Comey, and then Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am going to be voting in support of this, and I'm so glad that CEO Skinner, through you, referenced our PRC master plan, because I think that something key in here ties into it. And if anyone wants to reference it after the fact, it's on page 93 of the PRC master plan. And it asks us to understand that culture is an economic engine. Increasingly, communities are recognizing that the cultural sector can be a key component in the overall economic base of the area, and thus a contributor to the wealth of the region. So I thought that was just an interesting comment to bring to this, given Director Rydlo's prior presentation. And I'm glad that CEO Skinner mentioned our PRC report, because there's much more referenced in there about the need to increase our cultural opportunities. So I thank you for that.
Any other comments, Council? Councillor Doherty, and then Councillor Hammond.
Thank you. I am very supportive of this recommendation. I think we have nothing to lose and so much to gain. And we have, well, I have lived in this community for 30 years, and I have seen the notion of an art center get tossed around, twisted around, adopted and then rejected so many times at so many different locations and so many different sizes. And this, to me, is possibly just right-sized. And it fits so extremely well in our waterfront master plan, within all of our strategic plans. And I'm very excited about the potential here.
Thank you, Councillor Doherty. Councillor Hamlin.
I also will vote in favor of this, and really wanted to thank our CAO for her hard thinking and research on this. I hadn't expected such a thorough report back, to the point of even where we have some land, and I can't even believe it fits into the waterfront master plan as a potential. So anyway, thank you. I'll vote in favor.
Good. I think we've gone around the horn well on that one. So I will call the vote. All in favor? That is carried unanimously. Thank you for that, CAO Skinner. So the next item is item 7.1, bylaw. And this is the bylaw to amend our procedural bylaw pursuant to the electronic participation item that we addressed previously. And it's moved by Councillor Hamlin and seconded by Deputy Mayor Hall. Be it resolved that bylaw 2020-53, being a bylaw to amend procedural bylaw number 2019-75 to include provisions for electronic participation for council, local boards, and other committees, be enacted and passed this 29th day of July 2020. I think we had a good discussion about the item beforehand, so I'm just going to call the vote. All in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you. And that brings us to notices of motion. And Councillor Hamlin, I think you had a notice of motion.
I did, but also, Mr. Mayor, I'm wondering if this might be a good time for a short break. It's been 2.5 hours. And
yes, and we're quite close to our in-camera, breaking for in-camera. So unless there's immediate need, I thought I would take us through to that. I think we should be to our in-camera session in the next 10 to 15 minutes. But if there's an urgency right now, I will certainly grant the break. Okay, well then let's continue. And if we don't get there by the next 10 to 15 minutes, Councillor Hamlin, then we'll call the break. So the notices of motion, I think Councillor Hamlin, you had a notice of motion.
as the Mayor has referred, so should I read the motion and then speak to it, or speak to it first? Sorry.
Read the notice motion and then speak to it, please.
Okay. The notice of motion would be as follows. That council support Collingwood's partnership in the initial Habitat in Towns Collingwood World Summit Conference within the current total 2020 administrative budgets approved by Council, and with a focus on attracting local speakers and participants. Further, that a staff report be provided to Council summarizing the conference outcomes, and to recommend options for Collingwood's continued participation in and steering of the UN Habitat Pioneer City Initiative. I believe there should be one further matter added to that insofar as the conference is going to be held before we meet again as a council, and that this should be passed tonight, that I'm also asking for a motion to waive notice so that we can deal with this evening.
Okay, so first we'll deal with the waiver of notice. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Doherty? All right, so I will call the vote then on waiving notice. All in favor? That is carried unanimously. Go ahead, Councillor Hammond, to speak to your motion.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. As Council is aware, the UN has and Collingwood have partnered with another association to hold a conference in September. It hasn't come to our council specifically for approval or for a budget to this point. So this is the intent of this motion. It also includes obviously a report from staff following the conference so that we can see the outcome of what has happened. I wanted to just say briefly that the conference is with respect to the UN sustainability goals, and there are 17 of them, and what they speak to are goals for the world to be accomplished by 2030 so that we will have a more sustainable future. And the particular goal that our conference deals with is number 11, and it has to do with cities and communities, and how, given that half our population now lives in cities, how can we make them in particular more sustainable? So there are 4 themes to the conference that can be found if you were to look at Habitat in Towns and pull up the Eventbrite link. That is the best way to look at those themes. But they have to do with how do we assess goals, development goals? How are we going to get enough finance for municipalities to do what they need to do? What about women and youth, who are the foundation of a lot of economic prosperity in towns and cities? And what about the impacts of COVID-19 on town development and sustainability? Now, I've said all that latter part because part of the motion you noticed was to attract local speakers and participants. And we have so many skilled and knowledgeable people in our community who could speak to these themes. So I just would like to make sure council and anyone who's listening knows of this and that there's still time to be a participant. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hamlin. Need a seconder for the motion. You get it on the floor, Councillor Doherty. Council, any questions or comments? Councillor Comey.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. To pick up on one of the things Councillor Hamlin mentioned, she talked about the themes which are posted on the website. And looking at those themes, in particular, women and youth as a fundamental component, and tying that back into when we last heard from CEO Skinner on this and our I think it was called a local steering committee. I was grateful to hear that Councillor Jeffrey was representing the environmental sort of aspect of it, and I understand we have one local business representative. I'll share the comment that it's not readily identifiable to me on our, I won't have the term right, local steering committee or local whatever, who our women and youth representative is to attract or steer or direct some of the groups in town that would be ideally suited to speak to some of these particular issues. Is perhaps CEO Skinner could speak to that.
Well, you know what? I'm happy to speak to it because I'm a co-chair of the steering committee, and this council has been well aware of the conference going back to the October 29th announcement when I went down to the City of Toronto. That spawned the visit from our Lieutenant Governor, the Honourable Elizabeth Dowdesel, and we had the launch at the library when she came up to Collingwood to visit and meet with 18 of our local representatives. So this has been a cumulative project, which is ongoing, and this is the inaugural summit this year. And so I think that while I'm appreciative of the motion, I think council has been aware and understood what's been going on. And the steering committee was a joint steering committee that was struck with the UN. The UN pilot project was through an invitation from UN Habitat to Collingwood, out of the many municipalities in Ontario and Canada, to be involved in this. And we saw this as a bonus and a great opportunity to leverage this opportunity to make Collingwood a pilot project and a center of this conference moving forward in the future. And it's very much involved also with the Regent Park remodeling, the third remodeling of that. And that's one of the living laboratories of the UN project. And so I think this is a great opportunity for our community. And I'm looking forward to the conference. And I know both you, Councillor Hammond, and Councillor Comey, have applied to be speakers. So we are looking forward to that presentation. And as our conference unfolds, it will be setting the progress moving forward. And it was always our intention that we would report back to council and provide the go forward plan. Certainly, this is, I think, a great opportunity for Collingwood to be a living laboratory for sustainable goal number 11. And reference to the UN has been throughout many of our conversations, including our strategic plan, our diversity, and the UN, our recent option tonight to join the Coalition of Inclusive Municipalities, which is a UN initiative, and this is the Canadian chapter. So I certainly support the motion, and I'm looking forward to a very successful conference and to reporting back to council. And if the CAO wants to add to that, I will pass it over to her.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I agree with what you've said, and I think this is a big opportunity for Collingwood. And I do also accept what Councillor Comey has said around making sure that we do have representatives of women and youth as we move forward. And that's something that we'll also keep in mind as we're setting up facilitators and speakers in the conference, and also as we create the staff report moving forward. I think this is a very, it is, I hope that you will support the motion today, just to put everything on the record. It's good for council to have done so, that there is support for moving forward, and I like that type of clarity. And I hope that the community will perceive this as a real bonus and an opportunity, as the mayor said, for Collingwood to really show how great we are here as an example to many communities, and that we will attract expertise and funding that we may not have otherwise attracted to our local area through this initiative and the vigor of council and staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Sonia. Any questions or comments, council, before I call the vote? Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Actually, no, it is a question very specific detail to the conference itself. So I'll forward it to staff directly.
Thank you. All right. Unless there's other comments, I will call the vote. All in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you. And Councillor Hamlin, did you also want to put a notice on the table about the sign bylaw? You had an issue that you wanted to address on the sign bylaw.
Yes, thank you for that reminder, Mr. Mayor. So the motion would be, and all subject to our clerk changing this as she sees, but to, I guess it would be the council direct staff to implement the following amendment to the Town of Collingwood sign bylaw. Number 1, delete within section 3.1 the definition of sign and replace it with the following. Sign means any device, surface, structure, or other component part which is used or capable of being used as a visual medium to attract attention, to a specific subject matter for identification, information, or advertising purposes. Thank you.
Okay, so that will be dealt with in September. So we are now at other business and 9.1.1 Business Development Center MOU update. I think CAO Skinner and Director Rydlo are on for that.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will speak briefly to this item, and we have Director Rydlo in case you have difficult questions. But in your package, you will find a link to the current agreement between Collingwood and we actually have our contract with the South Georgian Bay Small Business Enterprise Center, which is a separate contract. So we are one party in the contract with the Collingwood Downtown Business Improvement Area, and with the Center for Business and Economic Development, which is the federal side where Gillian Farley works. So I know there's been some interest, several councillors and some other folks have talked to me about their interest in learning more about the Business Development Center, about the implications of a few things that are currently at play, what they may have on this center, things like the results of the accelerator study, the results of the economic development strategy that has been put on hold for a while by COVID, but I think we will get back on the tracks in the months to come. And there is also a tourism strategy being developed. But meanwhile, this agreement talks about the provision of the Business Development Center building itself to those partners I just mentioned, as well as the town's provision of the administrator at the front and how that will work with some backups from the other partners. And it does expire, I believe, on the 30th, at the end of July of this year. There's a provision in the agreement to extend it for 1 year. And we're recommending that it be extended for that 1 year, that it will take until after the budget for council to make any decisions on changes due to the studies that they should receive and strategies they should receive in the next months. And after that, I think it would be reasonable to take a couple of quarters to potentially re-architect how that space and or those functions might work in the future. Placing us quite nicely around mid next year, which is when this 1 year extension would then expire. So we do recommend that we execute the extension and that council approve that this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Sonia. Questions or comments, council? Councillor McLeod.
Thank you. So I remember this extension that we signed last year, and I remember that you were supposed to, that the Business Development Center and so on and so forth was supposed to be moving to our innovation hub on Hume Street, which, as I can see from my window, is still gravelled and unbuilt. And I'm wondering if there's any way that I can get an update on where that project stands at this point as it relates to extending this agreement, because I somehow feel like we might be right back here next year extending it again, or not. I don't know. What do you guys know?
Who wants to take that? CEO or Martin? Martin, go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Saunderson. The Hume Innovation Hub is an independent business driving an innovation center. It is one of the potential places that could be considered for the location of the accelerator, and with that, potentially the Business Development Center. We were hoping to get an earlier start on the accelerator planning. It took us a little bit longer to get organized. But we are now well underway and are planning on doing an accelerator presentation to council in September that would not only profile the kind of programming that would be required to provide the accelerator services to the businesses coming to and growing in Collingwood, but would also better describe what are the actual physical attributes of that accelerator space. COVID has certainly changed our perceptions around what that COVID space may look like, because we're all working remotely. Businesses operate fine. The need to have meeting space still exists, but that has changed and evolved over the course of the last 4 months tremendously. What you'll see in September is a bit more of a description of what kind of space we actually need. And as part of that, more of an exploration of different opportunities that are within town for that location of the accelerator and the potential co-location of the business development center. But at this point, there's been no commitments made to where that accelerator would be located or where the future home of the business development center is.
Thank you.
Any other questions, council? Seeing none, I'll call the vote then. All in favor of the extension? That is carried unanimously. Thank you. And now item 9.1.2, Simcoe Street pilot project update. Go ahead, Sarah.
Certainly, through your worship, to members of council. Martin and I are going to provide a brief update of the pilot that was undertaken on Saturday. So we had town staff between the Public Works Department assist with the road closures, cordoning off both the portion between St. Marie and here, Ontario, and St. Marie and St. Paul. And staff assisted in the morning to ensure that the tents and participants had set up in the areas that were identified, leaving the center lane available for emergency services. And the participation in the first section between here, Ontario, and St. Marie, there was no businesses that identified an interest at this time. So it was left vacant. It was utilized by pedestrians and cyclists in that area. However, when we get to the recommendations, I'll go forward or I'll review what we're recommending on a go forward basis. And maybe what I'll do is I'll let Martin take it away with regards to the input that we received from businesses and some participants and residents.
Martin?
There we go. Thank you very much, Sarah. Through Mayor Saunderson, we can go to the next slide. We conducted several different methodologies for collecting insights around the performance of the pilot. This is certainly outlined as part of action item 4 in the task force recommendations. We had the South Georgian Bay Tourism Association ambassador booth there in front of Town Hall. We had the Downtown Business Weekend Survey, which the BIA sent out to their businesses on Monday morning. And we also had a public Share Your Experience Engage survey going on since Sunday evening. As you'll see from the photos from both West and East Simcoe, they present attractive images, but you'll see very different ones in terms of where there's traffic and stuff happening. You'll also notice that we've got the Shop Safely sign on there. These pictures, I just want to do a shout out to both Rick Lex and to Dave West for supplying these beautiful pictures. If we go to the next slide, the South Georgian Bay Tourism Association ambassador booth had 65 visitors over the course of the day when they were there, and they certainly were a visitor booth. What was interesting was most visitors were coming for the weekend, and a few groups were taking day trips from towns and cities on only a few hours away. So as we talked about earlier, there are people coming here. What this visitor helped do was get people circulating around. Maps such as the Good Food Stroll, the Explore the Harbor brochure, as well as the Collingwood Trails and the See and Do activity guide were instrumental in helping to serve that. Next slide. The Downtown Business Weekend Survey provided some very good insights in terms of what businesses saw and experienced coming out of that day. These numbers are specific to those businesses that are open on Saturdays. And we asked them a number of questions. We also filtered those questions not only in terms of general responses, but responses by those businesses that are either in the food service, markets, cafe, and arts sector because we know that those are some of the ones that are not only very sensitive, but for whom this means potentially a lot more. And the first key question that we used to evaluate this was, what were your business sales like this past weekend compared to the last few Saturdays? And as you see, there was good response in general, but particularly strong response from the food service, markets, and arts sector in terms of what was going on. At 57% saw better sales. And we had a very strong base that were like, you know what, it was neutral, which is good news. There's certainly some that experienced some lower results, and there's some reasons that we can talk about later on why that happened. The other one that we wanted to share with council today was, how likely is it that you would recommend repeating the Simcoe Street pedestrian only walkway? We had general response rate of 50% said that they would likely recommend it. And once again, over 60% for those in the food service, market, arts sector. Those arrows indicate a significant difference versus the base results. If we go to the next slide, we can share the results of the public share experience engaged survey. We had about 30 responses to this, which may not sound that big, but considering that we only had essentially 48 hours to gather this, it wasn't bad at all. And it gives us at least a snapshot in terms of public perceptions. 84% of people enjoyed the walkway. 80% were very satisfied or somewhat satisfied with some key attributes that we asked questions about. And 65% were extremely likely to recommend Collingwood as a place to visit. And that's an extremely high recommendation score for perspective. So on to the next slide. The key insights that we had were, first of all, general support from the downtown businesses, but there were some concerns and they should be taken into consideration. First of all, the emptiness of the East Simcoe area without any businesses going, we're going to take that on. There were some businesses that claimed lower traffic on here Ontario Street, feeling that a lot of the traffic was going down Simcoe Street versus circulating down to their businesses. Certainly better promotion and information about the walkway was identified for online reference. Downtown businesses not on Simcoe Street were interested in having a booth on the walkway. And finally, additional staffing costs are required for outside space. And that was another concern that they commented on. Certainly the food service, market, arts sector experienced significant benefits, visibility, traffic, and some even saw the record sales that they've ever seen over the last 3 months, which is of course great news for them. And last but not least, there was certainly strong public support. They enjoyed the experience. They certainly did ask for additional opportunities to understand where there's parking as well as other attractions downtown. With that, I'll pass it on back to Sarah.
Certainly. So looking at this information, if we go to the next slide, it speaks to what we are recommending going forward. So the recommendation was that council look at proceeding with the pilot closure for the portion between St. Marie and St. Paul. And again, the thought was to, if we encourage traffic in that area on Simcoe Street between here, Ontario, and St. Marie, they would be able to also see the event, and it provides additional parking for those that wanted to utilize that area and still allow the pedestrians to access the sidewalks. And more significantly, the businesses in that area still have not expressed an interest to put anything out. And when we do have a road closure of this nature, we have to close the laneway that crosses over to the Moguls, over to our Simcoe Street parking lot. So that having that closed and not allowing the residents and the businesses to access that whenever it's vacant basically wasn't particularly desirable. So we're looking at moving forward for August 1st, so this Saturday and subsequent Saturdays as recommended by the CAO with the input from staff and the businesses. And further, that's subject to the requirements established by the province and health unit. Should a business organization wish to create an event with expanded uses beyond existing businesses, that the entity submit an event application. And again, this is being recommended because the organizers felt that if other businesses could participate, if they're allowed to have additional entertainment in that area, it would further animate and activate the space, creating more interest. on a go-forward basis. And now that we're opening up the event application process effective August the 4th, we thought that this would fall in line with that. And based on these businesses, we would look at waiving the permit application fee, which is for a low-risk event. I believe it's $25. And that's it.
All right, thank you for that. So it is moved by Councillor McLeod and seconded by Councillor Comey that council support proceeding with the Simcoe Street pilot closure for the portion of Simcoe Street between St. Marie Street and St. Paul Street for Saturday, August 1st, 2020. And further, that an event application be submitted to carry on this initiative for further closures to allow for expanded uses, as well as allowing other organizations and businesses to participate, subject to COVID-19 provincial and health unit orders and guidelines. And further, that the associated event permit fee application be waived. Questions or comments, council? Councillor Ham.
Yes, I would just like to follow up on the issues relating to the first block between here, Ontario and St. Marie. And wondering, and I guess this is a question through you, Mr. Mayor, to staff, if other businesses showed an interest in setting up there, whether it be vendors also downtown or the Patiolicious gets underway, would it be possible for the CAO to have the authority to allow that extension into the other block?
Well, it's resting on the CAO's head, so I'll look to CAO Skinner.
Thank you, Your Worship. I actually have a question for the clerk. I'm not sure whether under a regular event application, staff have the power to close the street. Okay.
Sarah?
Correct. Through your worship to Councillor Hammond. Right now, the businesses are operating on these street closures under the conditions of the encroachment permit. So only the business that abut the property that's being closed can expand, but under the events permit application, it could be expanded further outside businesses or organizations or potentially farmers market vendors through that process, and additional council approval is not required.
So do I understand that I could, if I suggested amendment here, that it could work? Like my amendment would be to say that further that the pilot exposure be extended to the portion of Simcoe Street between here, Ontario and St. Marie, subject to the applicant submitting an event application and is recommended by the CAO.
Clerk Almas?
So an amendment wouldn't be necessary to achieve that. So if they filed an event application for that area, they could proceed with that. As for any other streets within the downtown, now that our event application is opening up, it has to be evaluated within our events criteria. The appropriate emergency services and staff sign-offs are required, and it can proceed on that basis.
Okay, thank you. So I would like to make the suggestion to add that. Is this the appropriate time?
Yeah, I just would look to the clerk for clarification. Is the addition necessary, or is the current wording allow for that eventuality?
The current wording provides for that, so an amendment would not be required.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, just as a follow-up, because the recommendation now just talks about the portion of Simcoe between St. Marie and St. Paul, but you consider that fine because of the event application flexibility, is that?
Under the pilot closures, yes.
Okay, thank you. That's my question.
Good. Any other questions, council? All right, I'll call the vote then. All in favor? That is carried unanimously. Thank you. That brings us to our last item under other business, which is 9.1.3, ban of barbecues and similar cooking devices in Sunset Point Park. Welcome, Director Milanovic. You have the floor.
Good evening, Your Worship, Deputy Mayor, and members of council. Council members should know that staff continue to receive and monitor all public feedback regarding Sunset Point with respect to such things as public volume, parking volumes, and potential risky behaviors observed within the park. In addition to this, staff are conducting our own observations using parks, bylaw, and redeployed staff who manage the resident-only parking area. It is from these observations and many from the public that safety concerns from overcrowding, non-compliance to social distancing rules, safety and environmental concerns related to the increased number of cooking devices, and hot coal and ash disposal within the park remain top priorities. In an effort to reduce damage to the park, decrease overcrowding, and increase public adherence to provincial guidelines for gathering and distancing, it is recommended that all barbecues and cooking devices be temporarily banned at Sunset Point until the end of summer. This then would be reviewed as part of the park's bylaw update later this fall, with council's approval of any changes prior to next summer season. The proposed prohibition will be communicated on all social platforms and the town website to notify the public. Signage would be installed along Pretty River Parkway to inform visitors of the new rules prior to their entrance to the park. Within the park, signage would be installed prohibiting the use of existing barbecues at Sunset Point and the personal cooking devices. CBO Miller has suggested that non-compliance with the temporary prohibition be enforced under the public nuisance bylaw. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Milanovich. So I'll put the motion on the floor and then we can have discussion. It's moved by Councillor Doherty and seconded by Councillor Berman. Whereas Sunset Point Park is a popular destination for residents and visitors during the summer months and has consistently reached capacity limits over recent weekends, and whereas many users of the parks have been utilizing barbecues and cooking devices that create a nuisance and safety concerns for other park users, such as but not limited to unsafe and or hot cooking devices in close proximity to others, smoke, unsafe disposal of coals, and space required for appropriate physical distancing. Therefore, be it resolved, the council herein support the temporary ban of barbecues and other similar cooking devices in Sunset Point for the balance of 2020. Any questions or comments, council? Go ahead, Deputy Mayor. Then I've got Councillor McLeod and Councillor Doherty.
Thank you. I was wondering if I could just offer a friendly amendment to the wording for clarification. And the amendment would be to the effect Sunset Point Park, all adjacent streets, the parking lots, excluding private property. And the reason for that, if you'd like me to speak, or we'll just put it on the table.
Well, go ahead and give your rationale, and then I will look to the clerk about whether this is amendment or friendly, and we'll go from there.
Okay. I don't mean to be tongue-in-cheek, but I will. I am speaking of experience as a Buffalo Bills fan, and having lived in the Niagara region for 4 years when they attended the Super Bowl. And if you know what I'm talking about, I'm referring to tailgating. And what I'm just concerned about is that we put a ban in effect, and somebody then takes their vehicle, say a Dodge Caravan, and moves it a block away, and now is having a charcoal barbecue with 10 people surrounding their vehicle on an adjacent street. And now we've just taken the problem from one area and we've simply moved it into the residential area. So I just would like to see this ban be completely encompassing, minus the private properties.
I'll look to Clerk Almas first to get the idea of the amendment, and then if we ban, go ahead, Clerk.
Certainly, through your worship, to members of council, I know that Director Farr is also in attendance. I believe that they are looking at installing this signage at the entrance points as well off of Huron Street. And I think that would be accommodating and in line with what our expectations are as well. So if that's council's will, I would suggest that could be included, unless Director Farr or CAO Skinner has something further to add.
I would just say thank you, Clerk Almas. I would just say that the nuisance bylaw allows the enforcement of any matter that is signed. So I don't believe that signage has to be part of the motion. The intent is to post those signage to give effect to the bylaw.
Yes, I guess, and the follow-up question would be just for clarification, the amendment to the bylaw to include the areas that has the deputy mayor has referred to. Would those be caught under the existing circumstances, or should they be included to make the bylaw effective in those areas?
I understood, Mr. Mayor, I understood that the bylaw is a generic and speaks to activities undertaken in public can be subject to the nuisance bylaw as long as there's signage. I think that perhaps out of an abundance of caution to provide clarity, so you could say something to the effect of including but not limited to.
Does that assist, Deputy Mayor?
Sorry, I was mute. Yes, it does.
Okay. So then do we need, Clerk, then do we need to add that into the motion? Just add the phrase including but not limited to public spaces, parking lots, and side streets, or no parking zones or parking zones, whatever that would be.
Yeah, I think we should include that.
Okay. So the deputy, and I think that's a friendly amendment. So I'm going to look to Councillors Doherty and Berman, who were the movers, or will be the movers. I haven't read it in yet. And I see a yes from Councillor Berman. How about you, Councillor Doherty? All right. So then I will read in the motion with the, I will stick in the amendment, hopefully at the appropriate point. So it's moved by Councillor Doherty and seconded by Councillor Berman. Whereas Sunset Point Park is a popular destination for residents and visitors during the summer months and has consistently reached capacity limits over the recent weekends. And whereas many users of the park have been utilizing barbecues and cooking devices that create a nuisance and safety concerns for other park users, such as but not limited to unsafe and or hot cooking devices in close proximity to others, smoke, unsafe disposal of coals, and space required for appropriate physical distancing. Therefore, be it resolved that council herein support the temporary ban of barbecues and other similar cooking devices in Sunset Point Park for the balance of 2020, including but not limited to public spaces, parking lots, and parking zones. Does that capture that adequately, Deputy Mayor?
Sorry, I thought I didn't hear streets in there.
I said parking zones or street parking zones.
Fair enough. Yep, fair enough.
All right. Any other questions or comments then? Go ahead, Councillor Doherty.
Thank you. Through you, and I'm not sure whether this will be to the CBO or to Mr. Milanovic, but how prevalent is this problem? Are we punishing the masses for the very, very rare transgression, or is this becoming quite a common issue?
Director Milanovic.
Through your worship, I believe it was mentioned that last weekend there was plumes of smoke that would drift across the parking lot from all the barbecuing.
Okay, that sounds prevalent to me.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Comey, you had a question?
I do, please, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Director Milanovic. So are there actual standalone barbecue areas at Sunset Park?
Through your worship to Councillor Comey, there are, I believe, several fixed barbecues.
Thank you. And as a follow-up through you, Mr. Mayor, are we saying we're banning the use of those as well?
Through your worship, yes, we are.
Okay, so can you, through you, Mr. Mayor, can you help me understand why in particular? So I'm translating this as we have this new concern that there are more people bringing little hibachis or portable barbecues, whatever we want to call them. Why? What is the thought behind limiting the already fixed barbecues that were obviously put there purposefully for people to use?
Well,
Through you, Your Worship, you can imagine if there was only the several barbecues in the park to be used, the long lineups, the adherence to social distancing might not be followed. So our concern was the lineups and the amount of people gathering around them, possible issues. You can imagine people getting angry, waiting for people to finish barbecuing.
Yeah, I suppose so. As a follow-up to an additional part of the motion that was added as an amendment by the deputy mayor, does this no portable barbecue use in parking lots and streets apply to just the area surrounding Sunset, or it would apply if you wanted to tailgate at Fisher Field?
I think based on the motion we have before us, it is Sunset Point area that we're looking at. And,
okay.
Deputy Mayor, do you want to speak to that?
I'm just surprised with regards to the portable barbecues, I'm surprised that they've been in use at all, or why they would be in use still going forward, just from a public safety. Like, who's using them? Who's cleaning them? Who is deeming social distancing around them? Like, they should not even be a discussion point, period. They should be out of use still.
Okay, is there any follow-up, Councillor Comey?
Yes, the follow-up was, is it just the area around Sunset Point, or is it to the entire town, this ban on portable barbecues?
It's just Sunset Point based on the bylaw or the resolution that's in front of us.
And the request behind this is that this year in particular, unlike any other year, this is a problem.
We're certainly hearing from our residents that it seems to be more of a problem this year, and with the COVID spacing, to my knowledge, there aren't any barbecues in any of our other waterfront parks, fixed ones, and I don't know about the extent of use of portables, but this particular resolution relates to Sunset Point.
Okay, so then, thank you, Mr. Mayor, you raised an interesting point. Could families bring portable barbecues to Millennium Park? Could they go down there by the terminals and barbecue?
Director Milanovich? Oh, and Sarah had her hand up. Either whoever wants to take this.
Certainly, I can speak to this through your worship to Councillor Comey. The charge that would be utilized is a prohibited activity that's prohibited by sign. So it's wherever there's signage up for this. So staff are required to place the appropriate signs before they can enforce this. So wherever we put the signs, it can be enforced. So right now, we're only proposing to put signs regarding this issue around the Sunset Point area, and now and confirming into the parking lots and abutting streets.
Of Sunset only. You can go ahead and enjoy a family barbecue at our other parks or parking lots.
And if it becomes an issue, then we staff have the ability to sign, and because we already have a bylaw in place. So if it becomes an issue somewhere else, we would take a look at that situation too.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor McLeod.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, to Georgian Milanovic, what are we going to do with the places where we have those barbecues installed currently? And what are we planning to do with the concrete tubes in which the charcoal that we put there a couple of years ago in order to collect the charcoal that's been used elsewhere? Are we planning on covering those with a tarp, or what are we thinking?
Director Milanovich?
Through you, Your Worship, we're going to assess this. We are going to cover up the other barbecues or try to remove them, the existing ones. And as for coal disposal bins, we're going to reassess this in the fall and update the parks bylaw and have it brought forward.
Okay, thank you.
All right, unless there's any other comments or questions, I'm going to call the vote. All in favor of the resolution? And opposed? Duly noted. So next, well, let's get the in-camera motion on the floor, and then we will have a recess for 10 minutes before we commence the in-camera session. So the motion, which is moved by Councillor Jeffrey and seconded by Councillor Hamlin, is whereas the clerk hereby concurs the reasons for the in-camera sessions have been duly reviewed and considered, and the matters are authorized under the exception provisions to conduct a closed session in accordance with the Municipal Act prior to proceeding into closed session. Therefore, be it resolved that this council proceeds in camera in order to address a matter pertaining to 1, the security of the property of the town or local board, 2, personal matters about an identifiable individual, including town or local board employees, 3, a proposed or pending acquisition or disposal of land for town or local board purposes, 3, litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the town or a local board, and 5, the receiving of advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. And the items for discussion are appeal by Blackmore Gates, Inc., maintenance of 2nd Street, a back access lane, and social housing report. So unless there are any questions or comments, I'm going to call the vote then. All in favor? And that is carried unanimously. It's now 8:15, so we'll resume the in-camera session at 8:25. Thank you.
We are live again.
Thank you, Chris. All right, council, I will look for a motion to rise from in camera, moved by Councillor Berman and seconded by Councillor Doherty. All in favor? That is carried unanimously. Thank you. And we have a number of items to deal with from the in-camera session. I will read. Can I put these together, Sarah, or do we have to do them separately? Sorry, you're muted.
If you'd like to do them together, that would be fine.
All right, I think that's what I'll do. So whereas the town has limited municipal mandate and resources for social housing, be it resolved that council instructs staff to assist the Collingwood Nonprofit Housing Corporation to amend their letters patent for 250 Erie Street, Georgian Gables, to remove the town of Collingwood's interest while ensuring it remains nonprofit housing, and that the town asked the Rotary Club as property manager to carry out a condition assessment on the 29 and 47 Birch Street properties, Johnson Trust Apartments, and indicate whether the reserves in income are adequate to address any issues, and if not, their recommended actions. And if there are no comments or questions, I will call the vote then. All in favor? That is carried unanimously. Thank you very much. And we have we have a bylaw for today, confirmatory bylaw.
I believe that there should be.
I may have lost it. Okay, just a sec. Yes, we do. I'm sorry. So it's moved by Councillor Doherty and seconded by Councillor Berman. Be it resolved that bylaw number 2020-54, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the special meeting of council held July 29, 2020, be enacted and passed this 29th day of July, 2020. All in favor? That is carried unanimously. Thank you very much. And we will look for a motion for adjournment. Councillor Jeffrey, thank you very much. All in favor? That is carried unanimously. Thank you very much, council. That was a long and productive meeting.
Sorry.
Sir, go ahead.
My apologies. We didn't have the mover and seconder for the social housing recommendations. If we can just confirm.
Yeah, I think I've got the deputy mayor and Councillor McLeod, I think. So if they are both comfortable with that, good. I'm getting nods of assent there and a yes sign. So I think we're good. So thank you very much, everyone. Enjoy the rest of the